IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Upon further review edition, if you guys are anything like me, you're still riding a little bit of the high from last night. I'm here with my guy, Brian. We got a chance to start diving into the film, and the good was still really good, right? Notre Dame still won by double digits yesterday. They are still Sugar Bowl champions, and it's been a fun, really fun last, call it 20 hours for Notre Dame Nation.
Got about 3 hours of sleep last night, Trevor, and I woke up like, did I dream all that? And then I was looking at my phone, and I was like, nope. I saw you going crazy on Twitter, and I was like, nope, didn't dream it. Trev is crushing people today on Twitter, right, by the way. But no, it was a great day for Notre Dame. It was a great win for Notre Dame, and we're going to kind of put a bow on this victory, and then tomorrow we'll get together and we'll talk about Penn State. But today we're gonna kind of, this is what you do as coaches, right? You have the game the next day, you watch the film, you grade it, you break it down, you talk with your team, you go over the things you love and you want to build on, you correct the mistakes, and then you get ready for your next opponent. So, and that's what we're going to kind of do today, Trev. As you said, we're going to revisit the keys to victory. And then there's some other things that you and I saw on film that some were encouraging, some were frustrating, and we'll break those down as well. No mailbag in this show. If you guys do want us to talk more or answer questions or address certain topics, feel free to go ahead and throw a super chat in there and we'll get to those. But y'all might be tapped out on super chats after what y'all did yesterday, but we appreciate everybody. Looking forward to doing the show, Trev, because you watched the film and it confirmed what you and I talked about, which is the reality is you can talk about this mistake from Georgia, this issue with Georgia, this penalty, that penalty. Both teams have things they can point to. And we're going to point to things in the show. If they do this, if they do that, if Riley makes this read, if they make this one block, if this dumb penalty doesn't get called that shouldn't have been a penalty, or if Notre Dame lines up correctly on this play and doesn't commit a penalty, boy, this thing could have been even worse. And here's the reality. What the film told me going in is exactly what the film told me coming out, Trevor. And that's Notre Dame's a better football team than Georgia. They weren't last year. They may not be next year. I have no idea. But this year, this was a better football team than Georgia, and they played like it. They didn't play great. There's some things that I thought, like we'll have some conversation about Mike Denbrock's play calling in the second half, where last night I didn't love it. I thought he just kind of did enough to run it out, but when you break it down in the second half, you're like, you know what? He was a little bit more in it than I thought he was when you consider some different things. So we'll break that down as well, and of course the film confirmed that, yeah, Al Golden does know what he's doing, and they're pretty good on defense. So, but just it was great watching that film, Trevor, because it was fun to watch it and look at it from a standpoint of that team. They were just better. I mean, I remember breaking down the All-22 of the Clemson game in 2018 and the All-22 of the Bama game in 2020, and just saying to myself, like, man, that they were so overmatched there. And even in areas where they lost the battle last night, Notre Dame O-line, they weren't overwhelmed by Georgia, and we'll dive into that as well. So a lot to discuss, Trev, but it's so much more fun to do these shows when we're talking about a win. And it's so much more fun to do these shows when you got another one coming up next week, which I am very excited about.
Yeah, when we have this to kind of put a bow on everything, and then we can start diving into the semifinals matchup for the first ever 12-team college football playoff. It's a great feeling. You know, we all went to bed late. We were up late ripping off a 5-hour-long podcast, man. Brian, you were up to the wee out. I mean, you were up until the morning.
I went to bed about 6:30.
I was about to say, you crossed over from the threshold of it's late to now it's early.
Yeah, my in-laws are visiting, and when I went to bed, they were getting up. So, yeah.
So, but again, much rather have that issue after Notre Dame gets its first New Year's Six win in 30 years than if it was the other side of the story, right? Mm-hmm. But you guys know the drill, right? It's upon further review. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by diving into a review of the keys to victory before we start talking about the offense and defense specifically. And in the keys to victory show, Brian, you and I sat down and we talked about what did Notre Dame need to do as a team as a whole, right? Not just specific matchup-wise on offense and defense to come away and win this game. And the first part that we're going to review and kind of see if they, passed, see where the grade is were they ready to handle the moment? That was key number one for them, Brian. So what do you think?
There's no doubt they did that. I mean, when you look at that first series of the game, I mean, even offensively, they didn't play well in the first series, but it wasn't for the most part, it wasn't like they were swimming and like, oh my gosh, the moment's too big. We'll talk a little about Riley later, but I thought Riley was a little too anxious, a little too amped up early, but it wasn't like he was overwhelmed to the point where he was just playing the way Kevin Jennings did against Penn State. But you look at the defense on that first drive. I mean, that was such a tone-setting drive by the Notre Dame defense that you're like, all right, the defense came to play today. And like when the defense is flying around like that, you're almost kind of like, okay, like this is going to be okay, right? And you know, I got a little nervous at times watching the offense play, and you just kind of felt like Georgia was eventually going to hit a big play, which they did. Defense buckled down. But it just was one of those things where when you saw how the defense came out to just flying around the ball, there was no question that this Notre Dame team was in a situation where they were clearly ready to play. There was no doubt about that.
You know, one of the things that the Notre Dame team has been saying really at the start of this playoff run is, hey, guys, we've been playing in playoff games since September 7th. And I think that mentality and that mantra of the team was on full display yesterday. You know, this was a Notre Dame defensive performance, especially that the defense just kind of went out and did what they did, you know. And I do think the magnitude of the game kind of fueled a little bit into it. Like the boys were hitting yesterday. That was one thing that kind of popped off the screen for me when we dove into the 22, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. But, you know, Notre Dame as a team talks all the time about how this isn't something that's new to them. They've been playing in elimination games now for the last 2.5 months. And it showed, you know, it showed in them being ready to handle the moment. And it showed in them being able to handle when things weren't going their way. You know, they've just ripped off a 12-game win streak. At some point in that 12 games, in multiple different games, things didn't go their way from time to time. So all of that experience in games like that, I think, to me, it knocked it out of the park for them being ready to handle the moment. So the second,
I give them a check. I give them a check on that one. I mean, a plus on that one. Excuse me. This isn't an execution necessarily grade. This is a mentality, mindset, and type of grade. And I think Notre Dame was absolutely ready for this moment. So I give them a plus. I either go check, minus check, or plus. Trev, and sometimes I may go double minus, but fortunately we haven't had any of those since the second game of the year. Yeah, fair enough. The second overall team key to victory that we talked about was you got to win the turnover battle. And pretty self-explanatory here, pretty straightforward to look at, seeing that Notre Dame forced 2 turnovers and had basically 0 unforced errors on their end, Brian. So, I mean, this is another one, Trevor. Like, not only did they check the box, but this is a plus because there's winning the turnover battle just from a number standpoint. And in that regard, Notre Dame won the turnover battle 2-0. You could argue that they won it 5-0, which is the point you made last night during the show, which was technically it's 5-0 because it's literally called turnover on downs. It's not count as like the typical turnovers that we think of where there's an actual, a play that happens that allows them to lose the ball and you to get the ball. But to your point, 3 other possessions ended with Notre Dame making a stop that wasn't followed by a punt that flipped the field. But even if you just look at it from the standpoint of just traditional turnovers, it's still a plus. If you add the extra little sauce of what you referred to last night, Trevor, which is a phenomenal point, because again, you've got the ball inside the 20-yard line, Georgia does, and you don't score because of something that Notre Dame did. That's a turnover. But either way you look at it, it's a plus. My point is it's a plus even without the additional extra stuff, Trevor, because the turnovers they made, it's not just that they won it 2-0, Trevor. It's that they did it in a way that truly changed the face of the game. It truly changed the outcome of the game. You know, it's a 6-3 ball game. Notre Dame is up 6-3. And actually, hold on. So I'm trying to think. The 2 turnovers you had so the first one, Georgia's in control of the game at that point in time, right? Notre Dame's offense was playing well. Georgia's putting a drive together. They had just gotten, this was on the play where they had the long pass, right? Or was this on the second drive? No, second drive. So they're moving the ball down the field. You hit that back shoulder throw. And by the way, what was funny, I watched that on the TV copy. Did you see Mike Mickens? It looked like he was about to ready to go out there and tackle the dude. Did you see they had to kind of stop himself a little bit? That was awesome. He was just right there on it. But so they hit that back shoulder throw. They convert on a 3rd and 7. They hit that little slant route and beat Leonard Moore on a 3rd and 7. They get the ball down the field. It's a 3rd and 1. They get a false start. You run an inside zone that converts a 3rd and 6 with a run. Gabriel Rubio gets knocked back, driven off the ball. Not a good run fit from the linebacker. It's like, okay, is Georgia starting to kind of seize the momentum of this game right here? And then Gabriel Rubio has a great stop on the next one. You have a little motion play on 2nd and 9 where I thought Jordan Clark did a really poor job of handling the motion. He went across high and stayed high, which allowed for a really easy, like little 3-yard outcut. Guy goes up and makes a play. But he did make the tackle short of the first down. They get to 3rd and 1. That was a key moment. Like, even though he did a poor job, he closes on the ball. He tackles the guy short of the sticks. Get into a 3rd and 1, and the defensive line just destroys Georgia off the line. Like, here's the thing, Trev. We go back and look at that play, and you think of the turnover. Best case scenario for Georgia on that play was a -2-yard gain and settling for a field goal. I mean, they just blew Georgia's line up. But then Adon Schuler comes flying down. It was a great call by Al Golden to see the short. He had the short area on the backside, brings Adon off of it, and makes that big play to completely change the look of the game. And it was textbook. It wasn't, terrible job by the running back. It was, I don't know what you're supposed to do about that as a running back. He put his helmet right on the football. That's just textbook 101. Great awareness by the Notre Dame defense to see the ball and get the ball. That's a game-changing play. It's about to be 3-0 Georgia, and your offense hasn't done jack so far. And you get the ball back. And then Notre Dame kind of starts to take control of the game, but you have a little bit of a back and forth. Notre Dame ends up punting on their next series. Then the 3rd series, they hit the big play. Notre Dame settles down, forces a field goal. The Notre Dame offense settles with a field goal. Then the Notre Dame team comes back, and I was like, this is where another moment where I felt like the game was kind of starting to turn a little bit. You go 2nd and 19. You give up an in cut where I thought Adon Schuler gave way too much inside cushion when you have double inside linebacker blitz. Like, you can't just allow a free release like that. Easy 2nd and 19 completion. Get to 1st and 10. Junior Tilamaka gets driven off the ball. They give up a 7-yard run. And just like we saw the last drive when Gabriel got driven off the ball, very next play, they run a read zone, and R.J. Oben, I think it was R.J. Oben, blows up the running back. The guy keeps it, and Junior reads it perfectly, and he's right there to bring him down for a 1-yard loss. And then that forces a punt on the next play. Jordan Clark, again, a guy who had made a mistake on the previous drive, makes up for it, has a great 3rd down pass breakup. This is a theme for the defense the entire night. Mistake followed by make a big play. And so they forced the punt. They kind of punt back and forth after that, basically 2 3-and-outs. And then the Notre Dame offense finally puts the drive together. So you weathered the early storm. So what we talked about, handling the moment, right? Weathered the early storm. Defense is finally settling in. They'd forced kind of back-to-back 3-and-outs. Since the 66-yard gain, this is what the Notre Dame defense gave up, Trevor. They gave up since the 2nd and 19 conversion, the defense gave up a 7-yard run, a -1, an incomplete pass, a +13, +2, +5. Oh, sorry, that's the Notre Dame offense. A incomplete, and then Notre Dame takes a 6-3 lead. Georgia decides, which I understand Kirby being aggressive, but I think his aggressiveness came from a place of, if you really feared the Notre Dame defense the way you should have, and you read the moment the way you should have, because like the previous drive, if you look at my notes, Trevor, previous drive, they had a 1st and 10. They ran a slot fade that Adon Schuler was all over the tight end. Second play, they tried to run a screen, and Junior Tialamaka was all over it. And on 3rd down, Howard Cross and Bryant Young brought really good pressure, forcing complete. I mean, Notre Dame's starting to heat up your offensive line. That's one of those ones where it's 6-3. Let's just take the knee and go in and regroup. We're down a field goal. And they decided to go for it. And R.J. Oben makes the play of the game, forces the turnover. And just like that, a 6-3 game that you felt like Georgia was starting to gain momentum on. Notre Dame then kind of neutralized that. And it was kind of a wash going into halftime. All of a sudden becomes a 2-score game because of that big play from R.J. Oben. So they weren't just turnovers, Trevor. They were turnovers that resulted in points being taken off the board for Georgia, a potential field goal, right? Think about that. It's a 3-point swing on the field goal, and this becomes a potential 14-point swing, minimum, 4-point swing, right? Where or 10-point swing, depending on, you get a field goal there instead of Notre Dame giving up 7. So it's either 6-6 instead it turns into 13-3, or it could have been, a bigger situation if you get the touchdown on that first drive. So those 2 turnovers were just monumental. And then Notre Dame never returned the favor like they did against Indiana, right? Where, you needed that interception by Xavier Watts to stop them from scoring because you just turned the ball over. So that was huge, Trev. And then, of course, when you turn in like the turnovers on downs like you talked about, it only adds to it. But the turnovers are like anything else. Sometimes they're like, okay, turned it over. It's not that big a deal. It's 3rd and 10 at midfield. You threw a go ball that they intercepted at the 12-yard line. Whatever. You know what I mean? But then there's turnovers that are game-changing. And both the Notre Dame's turnovers yesterday were game-changing. And here's the thing. They were both forced. They weren't, what a dumb play by the running back. What a dumb play by – we've seen Carson Beck make a lot of those what were you thinking type of throws this year. That's not what this was.
No, I've been – you mentioned it at the start of the show, and I've been pretty active on Twitter or X, whatever the heck it is called now. But, there was a lot of people whose rebuttal was, well, it's you forced a turnover on a team that routinely turns the ball over. It's like, I don't think you understand something. This wasn't a pass thrown up into triple coverage that was just an errant throw. I mean, these were it wasn't fluky, right? Like it wasn't like a Navy turnover where Blake Horvath goes to throw the football and just drops the ball, right? Like it wasn't anything like that, right? And so I look at the Trevor Etienne fumble similar to how I viewed the Jaden Thomas fumble against USC. Like it was, it's unfortunate, it sucks, but it's a really great play by the
great
defender.
Defense.
Yeah, and that's what a Don Schuler came in and did. It's textbook. It's how you're supposed to do it. I saw a tweet earlier today that Notre Dame is the first team to have 3 sacks and 3 forced fumbles in a college football playoff game. They did it in the first half. And then you compound that with, look, we're going to have a lot to talk about on the offensive side of the football today. But one thing that they passed with flying colors is they didn't turn the football over.
Right.
And not even did they not turn the football over, they didn't put their players, they didn't put their running backs in positions where they could have.
Yeah. There was only I thought one throw that Riley had on a screen. And it was like, dude, there's no way you should have tried to throw the ball that way.
Yeah.
Outside of that, like you said, Trev, there weren't any times you're like, oh boy, you dropped that ball, but fortunately you recovered it. Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. So I'm with you, man. The winning the turnover battle gets a plus for me as well. You said plus for you, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, again, 2-0 by itself is good. That's a win. But when you talk about the game-changing nature of the two, there's no way I can go anything but a plus.
Sure. Absolutely. The final team overall key to victory was special teams must handle itself. And Brian, I'm going to be interested to see what your breakdown of this is. I have a feeling that we're going to be on the same page here because special teams was a game changer yesterday. And we spent a lot of time talking about how special teams can just do no harm. And not only did they not do harm, now penalties.
Well, I would argue that they did, but continue.
That's why I said I'm interested to see where you go with what your grade is here. But there's arguments that can go on both sides of do no harm, and I think they did enough positives, not just a net neutral, to kind of nullify what those negatives were. So, Brian, what's your grades for the special teams?
It's a plus. I mean, look, I was frustrated by the 2 penalties. And while I don't think the first running into was roughing, it was close enough to where I wouldn't have argued with it if they called it. You know what I mean? Like, I think by textbook definition, I don't think that's roughing the kicker. I think the kicker sold it a little bit, and I think the kicker also kind of got caught in air, and that's why he spun a little bit. Like, it looked worse than it was. But if they would have called it, I'd have been like, all right, I mean, that's why you don't go high. You always are supposed to be going in front of the kicker. That's just, special teams 101. 2 mistakes in a row that could have cost you. You had a situation where they were going for it on 4th and 2, and they make a mistake 4th and 7, and then you go back and you create a mistake that gets them back in 4th and 2. Now, fortunately, your defense is a beast, and they forced a turnover on downs there, but you needed your defense to bail you out. And those were frustrating, but the reason I'm still going plus here, Trevor, is because even though the special teams did harm in those regards, they weren't turnovers, meaning neither of them actually resulted in Georgia getting a first down, right? Even though, because even the 4th and 2 that they went for I would have given the special teams a huge double minus on that sequence if the Georgia would have gone and converted the first down and maybe got points. But it didn't. Your defense bailed you out. But even if you did give up points there, I feel like your special teams did enough to overcome that. I still hate the rugby punt. I do. I will always hate the rugby punt. But even with the couple rugby punts, I thought they did a great job of flipping the field with James Rendell. He had a couple boomers in there that I thought, it's just, boy, when that kid gets a hold of it, man, like it goes. And I thought he did a nice job, averaged 43.4 yards per kick return, had 2 land inside the 20. None of them were touchbacks. On his 5 punts, none of them ended up being touchbacks. They ended up getting good field position. The defense was in good field position on all of them. I think there was one that Georgia returned 7 or 8 yards outside, and that was on one of the dang rugby kicks. Outside of that, they didn't really have any good return situations there. So I was good there. It was not good, but it did no harm. You did a good job of flipping the field. But then when you talk about the clutch nature of Mitch Jeter's field goals, not just that he made them, but he made them from depth. Your last ones with like less than a minute left, and it was, I believe, the 48-yarder was the one that he kicked at the end of the second quarter. I think it wasn't it 48, 40, 44, 48, and 47, I believe, is the order. Yeah, 44 was the one he made in the middle of the second quarter. Then he made one from 48, and then the 47-yarder was the one he made in the fourth quarter. So you're talking about a kid who came in this game 8 of 15 and had been struggling, kind of coming into the playoff. And he goes 2 of 2 and 40+ yard field goals to give you a 6-0 lead. That alone was okay. It's positive. And then when you factor into the notion he made a third one and he went 3 for 3 on 40+ yard field goals, and that was a clutch one because that meant that Georgia now needed 2 touchdowns to win the game. Where if he misses that field goal there, it's still touchdown and a field goal, which means you just got to hit one big play and then you're in field goal range. And so I thought that was a huge moment for Notre Dame in that second half as well, him making that. And then, of course, Trev, do you know your screen is still black?
Yeah, I sent you a private.
Okay,
chat.
gotcha.
Yep.
But then when you get to the point where you look at just the total game-changing play, you talk about the sequence of the field goal, so Notre Dame goes up 6-3. You have a field goal. You have a sack. You have a Notre Dame touchdown. And I'm trying to think that they actually ran 2. How many plays did they run before the turnover? Let me pull up because it was on. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull this up here real quick. So
yeah.
They go up 6-3. They ran 2 plays before the – no, here we go. No, it was the first play. So you had Notre Dame hits the field goal, and then you have the forced fumble, the strip sack, and then Notre Dame scores in the very next play. And then you come out they ran 2 plays after that, so that's 5. And I knew there's 2 plays in there somewhere. And then you have the kick return for a touchdown. Yep. In a sequence of 6 plays, you went from a 3-3 game to a 20-3 game. And the special teams got you 11 of that when you consider the extra point, or actually, 11 of that. You have the touchdown, an extra point, you have the other extra point, and then you have the field goal. 98-yard kick return against Georgia, a team that hasn't given up a kick return for a score since 2018. I'd have to be a nitpicking you-know-what to not give them a plus in that scenario, even with the mistakes that were made, because, again, this is what championship teams do. You made mistakes, but you made up for them. And we saw this from Notre Dame a lot yesterday. We saw guys making mistakes. Pat Coogan had a lot of he got his butt whooped a lot yesterday. But there were some very clutch moments that he had in that game. Blocks, including blocks, but then also the snapping it on 4th down when George was offsides. We saw other guys come out and have bad moments and then make up for them with big-time plays. And that's what you do, man. So 3 field goals of 44 longer, flipping the field with your punt team. You didn't give up any long returns. You had a 98-yard kick return for a touchdown. Sure, I wish they wouldn't have, had some of the silly penalties. But outside of that, this was an excellent job. And then they executed that fake late in the half perfectly, flawlessly. So I got to give them a plus. This is one of the better special teams jobs we've seen Notre Dame in this stage like this. And I've been critical of Marty Biagi times, but this is a program that 9 years ago, I just remember watching them against Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl, just get embarrassed on special teams.
Sure.
I mean, just getting pinned inside the 15-yard line every time they tried to kick it. I mean, it just was like you're watching 2 teams that just in special teams had no business being on the field with them, special teams wise. And now you come to it where Notre Dame dominates the special teams and against a team that had been known for playing sound special teams. It's a great place to be, man. And so I give Notre Dame a plus in this situation.
Yeah, you and I are in the same boat there, Brian. And I was interested to see how you were going to grade it out and what your grades were going to even out to, see if it was going to be similar to mine, and it was. And the ultimate deciding factor for me was the positives, right? That the Notre Dame special teams unit contributed to this football game. Not only did Mitch Jeter go 3 for 3, this is the first time he was 100% from field goal range since, was it Texas A&M or Georgia Tech? Because for him to go out there and do what he did, especially on that stage, is fantastic.
In the playoffs, he's been perfect in the playoffs. Did he miss one against Indiana?
It got blocked, I think. I think he went 2 for 3.
That's right. Indiana. He did have one blocked. Have one blocked. So the last time he was perfect was Louisville. He went 1 of 1.
Okay.
So, yeah, the last time he went perfect on multiple kicks, Trev, was the A&M game. He was 3 for 3. But even not only that, just looking forward, his stroke was really pure. It was really confident. And like you said last night, that's another part of special teams is you gave a team with a pretty dynamic kick returner 0 chance to return the ball. And the one time you let him return it, you pinned him inside the 20. I forgot to talk about the kick coverage, the kickoff situation and the kick coverage last night was also outstanding. So another thing to add to that. So you made mistakes, sure, but you more than made up for them.
Yeah.
And that's what really good units do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other way that I gauged it too is really the only unit that had the issues was the punt return team for the Bryce Young 2 penalties and the Jack Kaiser penalty that put them back in 4th and 2. So for me, special teams also gets the plus. That 98-yard kick return for a touchdown just had to have been a backbreaker for the Georgia sideline.
Yeah.
You go into halftime, you make some adjustments. You weathered what was Notre Dame's storm of that 17-point flip or that 10-point, rally to end the half there. And so you go out and you expect your defense to come out and run the adjustments that you made at halftime, 98-yard kick return. And which is interesting. You said it last night. They had their Bo Schembechler moment because at all other points in the game, they weren't giving him an opportunity to return it, So I thought that's what was weird. One of the adjustments that you made coming out of halftime was we're going to kick it to this guy.
I wonder if it wasn't intended. Maybe the kicker just didn't get enough of it.
Sure.
You wonder sometimes if that factored in, they didn't think they were going to have to cover, but the guy didn't make it. But here's a crazy stat because you don't have a lot of returns over the course of the season.
Yeah.
Georgia came into that game ranked 21st in opponent kick return average. They're going to finish the season 87th because of that one return.
Goodness gracious.
Well, they'd given up, see here, it's times 20. They'd given up 352 kick return yards on 20 returns. Well, then you add a 98-yarder on 1 return, and that's all that Notre Dame had yesterday, and that's going to jump your average way up when you've only allowed 20 returns all season.
Sure.
And it was just a big just a big moment for Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are going to get geared up here and move over to the offensive keys to victory, review those and see where they had kind of met, where they fell short. But you guys know the drill. Before we do that, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. And of course, the best way to support what we do here at the best way to support what we do here at Irish Breakdown is go to boards.irishbreakdown.com to the preview message boards. So, Brian, let's take a dive here into the offensive keys to victory and kind of revisit where we thought those were going to be at. And during the Keys to Victory show, you and I talked a lot about what Notre Dame's offense needed to do. And per usual, the first one was start fast. I have a feeling I know which way you're going to go with this one. But, Brian, did the offense start fast?
No, Trevor, they did not. They get a minus on this one. The offense struggled early, to say the least, and it was a lot of different things. I mean, you come out your first drive, you go 3 and out. On your first possession, you lose yards, which is interesting. Both teams lost yards in their first possession, although Notre Dame didn't lose as many yards as Georgia did. You come out your second possession again. You do get an early first down on that slant route to Jordan Faison, which I would have liked to see them go back to something. They did that little quick out motion, and we talked about stuff like that. And then after that, you run a 3-yard gain, and you get a false start. And the second and 12, you've got a little bootleg screen called. Where actually I liked the call, and if he doesn't get pressure and he can snap that ball off to KJ Bolden, or even better, if Riley could have got outside. It was KJ Bolden against 2 guys, and either Riley throws the ball to Mitchell Evans and he hits him in stride and he can get up sideline. It's him and KJ. If KJ makes a tackle, it's 4 or 5 yard gain. If KJ doesn't make the tackle, Mitchell Evans running for a while. Or if Riley's able to get clean outside and KJ Bolden takes Mitchell Evans, then Riley Leonard's running upfield. It's a play that they ran a ton with Jaden Daniels last year. We've seen him run that with Riley Leonard this year. But you get blown up the middle. I believe it was Pat Coogan gets blown up the middle and you end up getting a 1-yard gain on a play that could have gone for more. Totally killed the drive. Next play, Anthony Knapp just gets whooped by Jalen Walker. Riley's got to scramble, throws the ball, quickly, and they're punting again. So you basically had a 3 and out and a 5 and out on your first 2 drives. Did get a field goal on drive 3, but then on drive 4, you're 3 and out again. Drive 5, you'd have a nice field goal drive. So, 2 of your first 5 drives, you get points, which is by itself not ideal. But I'd have felt a lot better if they would have got a touchdown on one of those 2 drives. And now I will say this, as a counter to some of the crying I'm saying about the sideline penalty that Georgia got, which was a penalty. But I'll give you that penalty, which gives the ball to Georgia at the 11-yard line, and maybe you score because, you had the ball there later and you didn't. But you then got to give Notre Dame the play where Riley Leonard goes for 32 yards and gets tackled at the 29, give him the face mask, and now Notre Dame's got the ball first down at the 14-yard line. So I'll see that, and I'll raise you, Riley, that. Yeah. And I'll also raise you a ridiculous, pass interference penalty on Jack Kaiser, which still, like, the fact that people think you have to turn to the football in college football amazes me that people still think that. You have to make a play on the ball. You don't have to play. You don't have to turn around and play the ball. Anyway, but the point is the Notre Dame offense just did not play well early. They got beat up front. I felt the quarterback did not a very good job handling everything. It was going too fast for him in the pass game, in my opinion. I do. I felt like his read, he was speeding up his reads. He was making bad pre-snap reads. First pass of the game, Trev, first play of the game, actually, the pass that got tipped. If he reads that to the right, to the correct side, left side, he's got a receiver coming wide open. They were running their snag concept, their short option snag. So they have the tight end runs a little middle option route, and Bo Collins, was it Bo? Might have been another, but he runs a little snag, and then you have a slide route. And then backside, you had a little stop. No, it wasn't Bo, because Bo might have been Jordan Faison. But basically they flew out to the slide. And then there's just a linebacker on the second level, and the linebacker stayed on the tight end, and that he comes wide open. I think it's Faison. He catches it, and he turns upfield. I'm actually going to go pull that play up. Now, he turns upfield, and he's getting positive yards. But Riley read the wrong side. He was indecisive with his throw, gets batted down, and now all of a sudden it's 1st and 10. I think that was actually Chris Mitchell. I'm looking at the play now. I think it was Chris Mitchell would have been the guy open on that play. Greathouse was on the inside. But, Chris Mitchell is wide open. He catches it. He turns upfield for at least 4 or 5 more yards. So instead of it being worst case scenario, 2nd and 1, maybe another first down, you're now in 2nd and 10, and you're behind the 8 ball a little bit against the Georgia defense. So there was too much of that in this game for the offense, too many missed opportunities where, too many plays where it's like this one guy getting beat, the quarterback not being comfortable with what he was seeing pre-snap, which then made him uncomfortable seeing post-snap. You and I were sitting here going over some plays in the game where it's like, this one we were talking about was in the second half, but, you got Jordan Faison one-on-one, and he smokes the guy off the line of scrimmage. And it's probably a 35, 40-yard gain, if not bigger. I mean, Jordan's got to make a guy miss. Riley just hits the top of his drop and just launches it. And so there was a lot of plays. There was too many opportunities like that. And against a team like Georgia, you can't miss all those opportunities to get 7 yards here, 8 yards there, 40 there, and expect to be able to put up a lot of points against them. And so definitely a minus for when it comes to fast start. I just thought mentally things were going really fast for Riley. And this is where I'll give Mike Denbrock a lot of credit. You could tell he saw that, which is why on drive 3, you start seeing Riley running the ball. All season, when Riley is mentally sped up too much, Denbrock runs him. And that kind of gets him a little bit back into, okay, calm down. And he played better it still wasn't great throwing the ball. We'll talk more about that later. But he was at least slowing down a little bit. So definitely a minus on fast start, Trev. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think you said it perfectly. There's too many missed opportunities, right? And the offensive line presented a lot of issues from jump, right? But this was a Riley Leonard game where it felt eerily similar to the Texas A&M game, where his reads were really sped up. It almost felt like, I said this to you yesterday when we were talking about the game, that it just – it felt like he was just too afraid to make a decision, which is why he was rushing through his reads, or too in a rush to not make a mistake, right? And that's why he was just moving through his reads way too quickly, because if somebody didn't come open right away, he just wasn't gonna let it go.
No, and I think the fact that he caught a tipped pass and then threw it again tells you that Riley's mind was racing 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Early in that game. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, you know this. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it was that to me.
Yeah.
It was one of those games where you felt like it was as a play caller, you got to look in your quarterback's eyes and just be like, this is what I got to do with him today. And that's what Mike Denbrock did. But it also something that he's still my player of the game for the offense because he made a ton of plays. But there's a lot of plays out there to be had. And we kind of say this a lot at times, and we say before, when he's on, this offense cannot be stopped. When he's not on, this offense becomes very stoppable. Mm-hmm. And especially in the first half of the game yesterday, early in the game, he was definitely not on as a thrower.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think you said it perfectly. So for me, fast start, it's a minus as well. The second key to victory that we had for the offense was mix things up. And we're talking about tempo, quick motions, movement, attack inside to out, take some shot play, take some shots, utilize play action. How are you grading this one, Brian?
This one is actually, Trevor, one where the reason we do this after watching film and not part of the postgame show is because of my answer right here is I actually give him a check. It wasn't great, but if you'd have asked me last night what my grade would be for this, I'd have been like minus. But as I went back and broke down the film, they actually did a lot more different things motion-wise than I thought. They were doing more jets that were influencing them. And it's probably still a minus in the first half. But overall, I really liked what Mike Denbrock did in the second half. We'll dive more into that later. But for this one, for the overall, I give them a check, but it's barely a check. I still would have liked to see them push the tempo more. That's something that definitely I did not like. I thought they did a nice job with the emotions and movement. They didn't attack inside out necessarily the way I wanted them to attack inside out with the run game, at least early, but later in the game. A lot of the big runs that they popped were plays that we're talking about. The big run from Riley Leonard, that was the 32 yards, the counter. right? That was what we talked about when we talked about the key, the counters that can pop. Well, that one cut back. Riley actually made a great read on that, by the way. Like, that play was not meant to go where he cut it. Like, if you go back and watch the play, they're running counter left. Riley sees a hole open up, and he just cuts up into the hole. It wasn't where the ball was supposed to go, which is what you said. This kid's just a playmaker. But then later in the game, they run a counter that he busts outside for a quality game. They started running more stretch in the second half, and that's where Jadarian busted that 20-plus yard run that I'm still mad about, because Jaden Greathouse did not need to hold there. That guy is not getting to Jadarian Price on that. And you start to see a little bit more of the counters that were just letting them get outside a little bit. The jets were working really well. You had 2 positive jets, one to Jordan Faison, one to Jaden Thomas ran a jet for 9 yards. And then the other jet that only went for 3, that would have gone for at least 5 or 6 if Jordan Faison doesn't fall down. That's not a big play. There was a guy there, but that guy would have tackled him about 3 yards later than he went down. You know what I mean? So, like, instead of 2nd and 7, it'd have been 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3 maybe is what I mean. But in a team like Georgia, those couple extra yards because you fell down matter a ton. But overall, I thought, and then of course I thought the reverse late in the game was a brilliant call. They just didn't line up appropriately, and so there was a lot more of that from Denbrock in the second half than I thought. Watching it live, and so that's where the plus check comes from, because it allowed them to answer with a scoring drive when Georgia made it 20-10, and then B, a lot of that stuff is why they put the game away with the 7-yard drive at the end on, plays where they were not like necessarily, just running it down their throat. Like, here, let's go look at that drive. Ran an inside zone for 4. You ran an inside zone load, which is the one where they run inside zone, but then they fold the tight end up to lead block. You ran that for 2. You get to 3rd and 4. And you run a little check down for 2 yards. That's when they did the 4th and 1 offsides play. Come back after that. You run inside zone for 1. You run inside zone for 2. You get to 3rd and 7, and you go empty, and you go quarterback counter. And that play was designed to bounce outside. Riley does bounce it outside, and he gets the 9-yard gain. Then they run another inside zone for 2. Then they come back with a jet motion, which on 2nd and 8, which gets them into 3rd and 1, which Riley then converts. And then they go +2. Then they get to a 2nd and 8, and they run a reverse to Jordan Faison that picks up the first down. But instead, you have the illegal formation. That was a huge moment, by the way, because they were going to take even more time off the clock, because it went from 2nd and 8 to 2nd and 13, and the next 2 runs didn't get them enough for the first down. They had to punt. If they get a first down there, game's over. So the penalties hurt them. And that's a definite minus for the offense. They had some really silly penalties that were their fault. That one was their fault. The hold on Jaden Greathouse, that was a legit call. That was a hold. At first, I was like, no, that's not a hold. And they just kind of kept holding on. And okay, it's a hold. The false start or illegal shift on Jordan Faison was a bad call. Either way, because it could have been he moved before Mitch Evans was fully set. They could have called that. You can't have 2 guys moving at once. It wasn't that. And then they could have said he was maybe going forward, and I don't think that he was. So I just think it was a bad call. This one was legit. This was just a tight end not get lined up the way he needed to get lined up. Now, it's also partly on Riley Leonard. Like, as a quarterback, you're responsible to make sure we got everybody where they need to be. Like, there's a play on defense yesterday where you had 3 guys were running around, and Drake Bowen literally grabs one guy and sets him in the gap. Howard Crossing, he stops Howard Crossing, goes right there, and then he turns the other linebacker and goes right there. It's a sophomore middle linebacker, make sure everybody's lined up where they need to be. Your senior quarterback needs to be able to do the same thing in that type of moment. But he shouldn't have to. The junior tight end also needs to know you got to get lined up, right? So I'm looking at it from the tight end coach standpoint. I'm like, no, he doesn't need to tell you to get lined up. You get yourself lined up. But as a quarterback's coach, I'm like, man, you got to make sure that you got to make sure that everything is ready. This is a big moment. You got to know that that's all ready. So some of those things I didn't like the execution at times, but overall, I thought we didn't run as much play action as I would have liked. Some of the play action they ran, they got pressured on, but then they ran that RPO action for the touchdown, so it did get them that. But overall, I give them a check, Trev. I wouldn't. I mean, I hear you're great. If you give them a minus, I'm not going to argue with you about it.
I was very on the fence with this one. if I'm being honest with you. Like the lack of you initially in the same boat that you were immediately after the game, I would have given this a negative, kind of with not a lot of thought. And I started going into it thinking, why didn't the offense start running more tempo? Because that's the one thing that you could have used to your advantage. And the one thing that is leaning me now more towards a check is that offensive line was not 100%. Like, I don't know, like Rocco Spindler, I mean, they asked Mike Denbrock about it after the game, and he was essentially like, no, he's definitely not 100%, but you were not keeping him off the field for this game. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there were moments where Billy Schrouth was very slow to get up. Like, you could tell that just something wasn't right. Something wasn't feeling right.
That was a physical football game.
And so just as much as it would have taken energy and steam away and the rotating ability away from the Georgia defensive line, I started to think, hey, maybe that would also become a detriment to your offensive line, because in the trenches around the line of scrimmage, that was very, very physical. I mean, those guys are hurting today on both sides of the football, and I can almost guarantee you that. So, I think once you factor that in, and once I got to look at the film and seeing what adjustments were actually made in the second half, because it's so tough in real time to see what that is. You know what I mean? So I think once you factor all that in, it is a check. The adjustment that I would have loved to see was scheming up something differently for the pressure, because it was very obvious when Georgia was in second and long and then in third down would send the house every single time. And I don't know if there was just a mix up in pass protection or protection calls. There seemed like there were no plays to run behind it, nothing sneaking running backs out of the backfield anywhere to get behind the blitz. So, that one was a little bit frustrating because it felt like it was the same thing. Let Riley drop back and hope one of the receivers gets open. But, Denbrock started calling the game knowing that his quarterback is real sped up. So that adjustment was a little bit frustrating for me, like, I guess, lack thereof. But overall, they did take a couple of shots. I love the awareness to draw them off sides on the one play where they ran the punt team off and came back on, and Riley's awareness, Pat Coogan's awareness to snap the football, and then Riley's awareness to, hey, we knew we drew the flag. Let me take a shot up to Bo Collins one-on-one and see if we can steal a big play here. Yes, inches away. I mean, that play and Leonard Moore's almost interception were probably a combined that far away from happening. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'll give him a check for this one, because I was in the same boat that you were. Before the game, before I watched film, I was like, yeah, no, there's no way that they're getting a check on this one. But diving into it definitely changed my opinion a little bit, for sure. The third offensive key was handle the line games and win up front. And I don't know how much time you want to spend on this one, but Brian, what are your thoughts on this?
This is definitely a minus. I mean, they got beat up front. Like, there's people after the game, I put some out second quarter, I think, that they're just getting dominated up front, which is a problem. People, this didn't age well. And I'm like, you guys, it is okay to say Notre Dame played their butts off yesterday and it was a great win, and not admit that every single part of the team played phenomenal football. The offensive line did not play well yesterday. They played hard yesterday. They competed their butts off yesterday. They did not play well. And if you think that's the best that the Notre Dame offensive line can play, I mean, we're not going to agree. As far as execution, the execution was a problem. But at times it's just, I can't really get mad at Pat Coogan. That guy's just better than he is. There were times, however, with like Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner and Billy Schrouth, where I'm like, yeah, you got to be better than that. Some of the issues they had were protection-oriented. Trev, you and I were going over that one play where they got Jalen Walker basically blows up Jeremiah Love because you're letting Jalen Walker get a free run as you're full sliding from guard to backside. And it's just like, I don't know why you're doing that. They should have adjusted their protections. Georgia, by the second quarter, at the latest, had a very good read on what Notre Dame's protections were. And they were sending rushers or twisting right into the open spots. Jeremiah Love got blew up on that one. Aeneas got blown up on the later sack. And it's just like, okay, there were no adjustments. Now, maybe that was Riley Leonard not setting the protections correctly. But okay, well, part of coaching is making sure your quarterback gets the protection set correctly, right? No matter what it was a mistake. And a lot of it was because of the line games. And they had a really tough time handling line games. They did a nice job, as you mentioned. They had the one false start. Georgia did no shift. I went back and looked on that because we weren't sure if they shifted on that. They did not shift. You had the right guard and right tackle both jumped, which meant there was a miscommunication on the cadence. And so when you break it down, it's like, look, they didn't play well. The offensive line got beat. The frustrating thing is they were close on several runs where it's like, if you just finish better, they didn't finish very well. But there's also a lot of runs where they just in plays where they just got whipped. You know, I think of the play where a defensive tackle just slants right across Pat Coogan's face, gets in the backfield, forces Riley Leonard out of the pocket. You get Emil Wagner on the first drive. Emil Wagner and Nathan Knapp both get driven right into the quarterback. You have the play where there's just a run through. And again, I don't know if that was Rocco's fault or if it was a protect. Looking at it, it looked like they intended to leave Rocco in a slide and they intended for Jeremiah Love to step into the hole and pick that guy up. I don't know why you do that against that look. That was my issue. Like, I understand at times you've got to do that, but against that look where there is no A-gap inside of Rocco, there's no A-gap player inside of Rocco, why you would have him do a slide there without at all looking at the linebacker. So Rocco touches no one, and your running back stepping into the hole to take on Jalen Walker, who outweighs him by 40 pounds and has got a full steam ahead run at him. That's not going to end well. So it wasn't all just personnel. There were also some protection issues in this game, but they didn't handle the line games very well, in my opinion. If they would have, they'd have popped a couple more runs up the middle, like we've seen a lot of teams do on Georgia. They gave up. You could tell it was in their head a little bit at times too, because they would hit and stop their feet. There was a lot of times you'd see Coogan or Schrouth or Rocco even at times where they would hit a guy and then stop their feet, which allowed Georgia to just lock them right into the hole. There was a play early where they ran inside zone left where if Billy Schrouth doesn't get beat, he stays on the guy, stays locked on the guy. Guy doesn't come off the block, but because the guy stopped him right at the line of scrimmage, Jeremiah didn't have anywhere to go. And so by the time Jeremiah gets to the hole, the linebacker's closing because there was just no movement. The guard had just stopped. Well, okay, if you're going to get beat in the line, keep moving the guy. Keep working the guy. Give Jeremiah a little bit of that stretch to be able to have some room to make the linebackers miss. Because when they were getting squared up on the linebackers in the hole, it was like these little tiny holes because guys were stopping and they didn't have any room to work. Couple of those, if you just finish that a little bit better, maybe Jeremiah or Jadarin have room to maybe make somebody miss or hit that hole a little bit quicker. So that was a big problem, just getting beat up front a lot yesterday. Again, yes, they played hard. And yeah, I can show you the play where Pat Coogan drove the guy into the sideline. That's great. That's a great play. Played his butt off. But if you watch it and you grade every play, he got beat a lot in that game yesterday. Run game and pass game. And Trevor, as you and I have talked about a million times, if you get beat up the middle, it's going to be a long day for your offense. And if you get whooped up the middle, it's going to be a long day for your offense. And the reality is Notre Dame got beat up the middle a lot yesterday. And it was a big reason why the offense struggled. And even like later in it, well, what about that last drive? Okay, let's talk about the last drive. What were the plays that worked on that? Great awareness by Pat Coogan on fourth down. Great awareness. Great play by him. 1 yard inside run, 1 yard inside run. Quarterback counter where the quarterback has to outrun the entire defense to the perimeter. It's not built on the line. Inside zone for 2, jet sweep to Jaden Thomas for 7 yards has nothing to do with the offensive line, which is partly why I ended up giving Mike Denbrock a check, because we said before the game, you got to have some runs built in there where you're not asking the offensive line to have to win the rep to have success. But you have a jet sweep for 3, quarterback ISO for 3. That was a well-blocked play. Inside run for 2, reverse for 10, inside run for 2, quarterback counter for 3. The offensive line wasn't exactly dominating Georgia on that play. You had some reverses and jets and some different things like that, and a quarterback counter where the quarterback just outruns the defense to the sideline that allowed you to move the chains. And because you couldn't get a push on the first 3 plays is why you had to go with the fake in the first place. Because you went, you had a +4 and a +3, and you get yourself into a 3rd and 3, and then you give up a pressure, and the running quarterback has to throw a check down because you're giving up a pressure. You're the reason you had to go for that on 4th down anyway. So the offensive line didn't play well yesterday. But a big reason why Notre Dame won the game, Trevor, is because this is what I love about this group. They frustrate me because, games like this, they frustrate you. They compete their butts off for 60 minutes, man. And that allowed them to at least do enough to win the game. It wasn't pretty, wasn't sexy. They're going to play a defense next week that's completely different, also talented, but very different. It's not big and powerful and going to move them around the way that they did. It's more of an athletic group. So, you're going to have a different task next week. But this was a bad matchup for Notre Dame, and they lost it up front. And but they competed enough that allowed them to win the game. And they got whipped, but they didn't get – I think I said earlier they got dominated. What I mean to say is they got whipped, meaning physically and just in the battles they got beat, but they didn't get dominated. So you weren't seeing Riley Leonard getting blown up as he's hitting the snap and getting hit from behind as he's about to throw, the guy coming around and strip sacking him like we saw from Notre Dame. They weren't allowing free runners off the edge, which are blowing up your running back. They weren't doing those things. And if you're going to grade which offensive line played better, Notre Dame's offensive line still played better than Georgia's relative to what, you know what I mean? Like the performance. I mean, part of that's the Notre Dame defense played better. But it's just, if you're just grading the offensive line, Notre Dame had almost twice as good of a yards per carry average, right? They were at 4.2. I think Georgia was in the twos, despite having a 28-yard run.
Yeah, 2.1 yards per carry.
And gave up more pressures than Notre Dame's offensive line, gave up more hits on the quarterback than the Notre Dame offensive line, allowed more free runners on the quarterback because Notre Dame's guys just that's the difference. And this is what I have liked about the line all year. And as frustrated as I get with Joe Rudolph at times, this is what I do like. The play that Monroe Freeling gave up to RJ Oben, that does not happen for Notre Dame, hardly ever. Because even when Anthony Knapp gets beat outside, that's the exact same thing that happened against Mikhail Kamara against Indiana last week. He got beat on the edge, but Anthony recovered and got a body on him, which allowed Riley to climb into the pocket, forced him to go wider, allowed Riley to climb in the pocket and drive a post. Where RJ was able to win and get around the edge, Monroe couldn't get to him, and RJ has the big sack. That's the same thing that happened when Junior Chialamaka had his big sack. And that's the difference, is you're not getting those clean runs at the quarterback in this game outside of maybe one play where Aeneas got blown up. But even then, it came right up the middle. You know what I mean? So, the tackles for Notre Dame had a rough game against Georgia, but they never allowed that. And it's not for lack of effort from Georgia. They tried to get around the edge. And they couldn't get around them. And that's where the athleticism of the tackles served well. The lack of power hurt them, but that's where their athleticism helped them. Like early in the game, Anthony Knapp gets whooped by Jalen Walker inside, but he still stayed on him, which allowed Riley to get out of the pocket. And so that's why I say, even though they played poorly, they still outplayed the other team's offensive line, but they battled. And that's ultimately why they played a role in the victory. But as far as the grade, definitely a minus.
Yeah. Yeah, the grade is a resounding minus for me, if I'm being completely honest. Look, I mean, I can appreciate them playing at a maximum effort because they did, right? There was not a single offensive lineman from left tackle to right tackle for Notre Dame that didn't lay everything that they had out on the field. If there's one thing that was evident when watching film, my takeaway was never, he just gave up on this play. You know what I mean? It was never, he just didn't care this play, which have been issues for teams this season, not Notre Dame's, but where the frustration starts to lie for me is when I start breaking this down from a schematic standpoint, from an analytical standpoint. You're 14 games in. How do you not understand how to pick up line games yet? How? That's what's frustrating to me.
It's not like they didn't see it on film and Georgia threw something at them they weren't prepared for.
Right.
We literally talked about this for an entire week,
and
you still couldn't handle it. Now, part of that's Georgia's guys are really good, but the other part of it is you didn't play well because I've seen teams with less talent than yours handle that line.
100%. 100%. I watched UMass rush for 226 against them. It's things like that. I would have understood if Notre Dame faced 0 defensive lines all season that ran 0 line games against them and just tried to play them straight up all the live long day. And Georgia, this was the first game that they ever ran different stunts. And it's not. And I think that's what's frustrating to me. There were too many free rushers up the middle. I think of that 4th and 1 play where Riley Leonard got stuffed. Your left tackle and your right guard looked like they were the ones trying to penetrate into the backfield. It literally, like it's things like that.
Are you talking to Trevor and I were talking about that play before the game. We were watching it. I wish I could pull that play up on film. But it looked like Anthony Knapp was trying to avoid the guy. And this is where you talk about the miscommunication. There was somebody that made a big mistake. And we think it was Knapp, but maybe it wasn't. But it's like Billy Schrouth goes inside, and Anthony Knapp looks like he was avoiding the guy he was supposed to hit.
Yeah.
And but then he gets to the second level and doesn't hit anybody there either. Like he thought he was supposed to do one thing, whiffed on that guy. I don't think he was supposed to. And then it's 4th and 1, and your left tackle doesn't touch a soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not going to work against Georgia.
And the guy that he could have blocked was C.J. Allen, who made the stuff.
Right, because Riley made the unblocked D tackle miss.
Yeah. Yeah,
and if he just
Nazir Stackhouse miss,
right, and if he just gets off and gets a piece of the linebacker, Riley's moving forward for first down. It was a lot of stuff like that, Trev. That was costly. It's costly.
Yeah, it was, and that's a frustrating thing. Is typically at times this season, this was the first game that we haven't seen Notre Dame's offensive line play at some level of decent in one of the 2 phases. Right, like there's been games where it's like, hey, pass protection kind of stepped up today, and then they're kind of all reliable as, hey, listen, like Anthony Knapp, for what he struggles in pass protection, he makes up for being a tenacious run blocker. And when I look at this game as a whole, the line didn't really do well in either phase, which is tough. And you could make the argument that at times Notre Dame's offense succeeded in spite of what was happening up front, but the one thing that you can never question was the relentless effort that was put in. Yeah. Which that to me is always going to mean something, because at the end of the day, if you're going up against somebody like we mentioned Pat Coogan, Nazir Stackhouse is just a better player. Like, and that's not a knock on Pat Coogan. Nazir Stackhouse is going to be playing on Sundays. Right. You know what I mean? But at some point, there are times where you have to tip the cap to the other team. And I don't want to discredit anything that Georgia's front guys did, right? They played a good game. Both defenses played a heck of a game. But at the end of the day, similar to Brian's point, if you can hang your hat on just maximum effort and never giving up, and on that final drive, I'm totally with you. They didn't go and start blowing them off the ball and start ripping off 6-yard runs, but it was little things like Riley Leonard converted. It was either a 3rd and short or a 4th and short on the same exact play that got blown up earlier in the game when they didn't get it
3rd and 1.
3rd and 1.
And they got 3.
They executed that play. And so, albeit it wasn't a 5 to 6 yard gain,
doesn't matter,
big play like we'd seen. But to your point,
you go that far past the first down marker, you're fine. It's a win.
Yep. Yeah. When in that same play earlier in that game, you whiffed and you didn't make the blocks that you needed to. So, in the moment where they had to just be okay, they were just okay. And you do that from never quitting, never giving up. And so that to me means something.
Part of my frustration wasn't that they got whipped at times, because I kind of expected that. I said before the game, that was my biggest concern coming into the game, because I can look at it and say, Michael Williams is a better player than Emil Wagner, Anthony Knapp are right now. Just is. Nazir Stackhouse is a better player than Pat Coogan. It was the stuff where you're like not touching anyone and you're allowing run throughs and the schematic mistakes. Those are the things that bothered me more than just, Pat getting beat on a play where just the other guy's just better than he is. I can live with that, because again, in those moments, Pat kept a body on the guy, and you could get out of trouble a little bit. They ended up not proving super costly. It's the plays where it's like, dude, you can't let that happen. You can't let that guy run through. You can't not block someone on 4th and 1. And you can't not touch a guy on a inside slant. You got to get your protection set. So those are the things that kind of get to you a little bit. But they survived and advanced. That's the big key.
Sure
and
did.
you hope that this line look, because like here's the deal: you've got 2 games in a row now where the defense has run a lot of twists and stunts and second level pressures at you, and you've struggled to pick it up. Guess what Penn State's going to do? Tom Allen's not an idiot. You know, I mean, he's going to say, okay, this team doesn't handle twists and this team struggles with really aggressive second level stunts, and Penn State's got pretty good linebackers, pretty good athletes at linebacker. So guess what Penn State's going to do? Number one, they're going to have Abdul Carter just screaming off the edge, but you know they're going to be running line games with him too. They're going to do so. This is what you're going to see: hard outside slants and Abdul Carter on third down, slanting around up the middle and just come screaming at Riley Leonard if they don't start picking those things up better. Tony Rojas and those linebackers are going to be flying downhill. So like the blueprint has been set. Now it's up to Joe Rudolph and Mike Denbrock to say, okay, now how do we find answers for it? Because if you somehow survive this game, you know, you're going to have to face the same thing from either Pete Kwiatkowski or Jim Knowles. And that's what all those teams do anyway. So it's not like they got to reinvent the wheel. This is just, okay, you do this already, do more of it because Notre Dame can't stop it. You're going to have to find some answers for those schematically and then obviously from an execution standpoint if you're going to, you know, keep moving forward.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. The fourth key that we had on offense was find ways to get into space. And kind of a tale of two halves here. And I know we're going to dive in more into that a little bit later. But Brian, initial thoughts, overall takeaway on the offense and their ability to get into space.
I'm giving them a check, Trev. It was a borderline. It was a minus in the first half, execution-wise. But schematically, there was things there. You know, I talked first play of the game. You've got Chris Mitchell open in space. You got Jordan Faison open in space multiple times in the first half. You had a couple plays where you mentioned if you can get the ball out to Jeremiah Love one time, he's got some room to work. You know, I mean, there was times in the first half where they were okay at that. And the minus in the first half would come from the execution more so than the scheme. The second half, Mike Denbrock did more to just say, okay, we're just going to hand the ball off now instead of trying to get the quarterback to read it. But there's a lot of things he did, in my opinion, in the second half with stretch plays, which allowed Jadarian Price to get outside. There were things he did with like the quarterback counters, which we said in the game, like the way that Georgia plays the counter, it's a mix-up because it will bounce. We said this in the pregame. It will bounce the way Georgia plays it at least a couple times, and that's exactly what happened. You had Jadarian bounced one, and then you had obviously Riley bounced one. And then there was the other counter that they kind of caught him in their stunt, and Riley makes a great move on it. And that was the best blocked play of the game, by the way, also was that particular play. And I liked it on that when they didn't just go completely empty. They actually brought Aeneas Williams in as kind of like a lead blocker. I thought that was smart. So I thought there were some good moments there that I thought second half, I thought Mike Denbrock was really good in that regard. There were some things he did with Mitch Evans to get him in space based on how Georgia was playing their coverage and how aggressive they were flying to the perimeter on certain pass concepts. I thought he did a nice job getting Mitch Evans in space on a quick out cut. He did a nice job, and Mitch did a great job finding that opening on that option route. But it was called because you knew the way they were playing zone, you were going to get open. It was very similar to the route that Chris Mitchell was open on the first play of the game. But this time Riley looked for him. So I thought in the second half, Mike Denbrock did a really nice job getting guys in space. And that's why Notre Dame was able to do enough to A, get a field goal drive, and then B, take 7 minutes off the clock. Even though it didn't result in points, those things resulted in them taking time off the clock. And if not for a dumb formation penalty, they literally would have run the clock out, in my opinion. I think they would have run the clock out.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I mean, I'm trying to remember how much time was left when Georgia got the ball at the end of the game. Let's see here. Fourth quarter, Georgia got the ball at the end with 1:49 left in the game. Right?
Yeah,
because you get a first down there, it's over.
Yep. Yeah, because Notre Dame waited, I think, to run their third down play until after the 2 minutes.
Yeah. And that was with it being 2nd and 13. So you ran the reverse at the 3:23 mark. And it stopped the clock because at being the 3-something minute mark, that clock keeps running after that first down.
Yeah.
So now Notre Dame's not snapping their first down play till less than 2 minutes left, and they're probably not and they're probably getting to that second down play when probably not running their second down play until the 2 minute again.
Right.
So it would have put things back another play, and you would have had better field position. So it proved costly, but again, schematically, it was a really, really good stuff. So that's why I go check on this one, Trev.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a check on this one, not only for the better execution in the second half, but when you go back and watch film, the play calling was there in the first half for parts. It just needs to be executed. Like you said, Jordan Faison went streaking down the field at one point in time. There's a screen pass set up to Jeremiah Love that if that ball doesn't get tipped at the line of scrimmage, he might still be running. And you look at some of these plays. You have, I think you said it was Chris Mitchell coming open on a backside dig late in the read progression. That if that would have stayed there, that would have gone for some yards too. So I think the play calling was there to get their guys into space, but there was a lapse in execution. And I know that you're kind of picking hairs, not you personally, but you can kind of pick hairs if find ways to get your guys into space. Did they execute it well? In the first half, but the attempt to get them into space was there, which for me, that's why it's a plus or a check.
And they did enough execution-wise to win the game. The 32-yard run from Riley Leonard, again, the goal was to get him in space. Now, later in the game, that resulted in him bouncing it outside, but earlier in the game, that resulted in him cutting up field untouched.
Yes.
Some of the stuff they did thrown out of empty and thrown out of one back where, okay, we're doing this because if they over pursue, Riley's going to step up and take off. And there were multiple times Riley stepped up and took off. That's part of getting him in space is look, if it's not there, we've spread them out with our formation. If the throws aren't there, you're going to have room to go do something. That's designed.
Yep.
That's it's not that Mike Denbrock says, hey, on this particular play, you're not going to throw the ball. You're going to run it. That's a draw. And they ran a draw. But it's hey, we're going to run this pass concept. But the way that Georgia plays our empty alignment and the way they play us getting out wide, we know that if they are covered, there's likely going to be a crease up the middle for Riley to go make a play. And he did that. So I think those are all examples. And then obviously that leads into number 5, which is the dudes being dudes. And there was a lot of things that I would give Riley Leonard minuses for, just grading plays. Got to make a better read there, got to make a better throw there. But, man, he was a dude in this game as a runner and just when they need him to be played. So Jadarian Price stepping up in the second half when Jeremiah went down and having a couple big runs that set up their field goal drive and helped keep things going. Jordan Faison stepped up and was a dude in this game, and a little bit better play from the quarterback, and he's even more of a dude in this particular game. So I thought that was really big. I mean, he had what was his receiving numbers? He had 4 catches for 46 yards. He had an 11-yard run he had 2 catches for 9 yards or 2 runs for 9 yards. He would have had 3 for 20 if you don't have that reverse or reverse called back. When he got chances to make plays, he made plays. I'm like, one time, I'm like, Jordan, stay upfield on that one, but he still got the first down. You know what I mean? He didn't lose the first down, but you had other guys stepping up, even though your star of stars didn't do anything in this game. This is what makes this team good, is that other guys will step up. Jadarian's numbers don't look sexy, but he was clutch in the second half.
Yes.
Riley's passing numbers weren't great, and he was just – I grade him as a minus overall in the pass game just because of some missed opportunities and bad reads. But when you add the running aspects into it, well, okay, you run for 12 yards, 13 yards on a pass play. It doesn't count towards your passing stats, but it's a passing play that went for 12 or 13 yards because you scrambled. You start factoring those things in there, man, you're like, okay, that's why this team keeps winning, even though it's not always pretty. Because your guys stepped up and made plays in those big moments, and Georgia's guys didn't. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I agree. This one honestly gets a plus for me because when the stat sheet looks the way that it does, when the lack of execution was the way that it was, especially in the first half, the way that you still win by 13 points is when your dudes be dudes. Legitimately, like that, it's not because nothing happened in this game for Notre Dame that was just, despite what some SEC fans might believe, despite what other people might believe, there wasn't just this miracle sprinkle of luck that hit Notre Dame in this game that caused them to win by double digits. You know what I mean? And so you don't win this game unless Riley Leonard goes and outruns a corner to the edge, turns the corner, and hurdles Malachi Starks for a first down. The running game doesn't start to get open unless Jadarian Price does things like take C.J. Allen head on in the hole, bounce it to the outside, and picks up a first down. Bo Collins had one target the entire game, I believe. Sorry, two. One of them was on the fourth down shot. The other one was his one catch for 13 yards and a touchdown, which he caught. The ball was slightly behind him. When you go and watch that play again in slow motion, the DB's hand is inside of where the football is.
That was a tough catch.
And for a guy that has had drop issues this season, his first target of the game goes for the touchdown.
That route, that's an example of what I say, play with urgency.
Yes.
He knew he was the number one option, and he knew he had to win, and that was a really well-done job there by Bo. I wish we would see more of that. Kind of like Jordan Faison. I mean, his top end on his slant wasn't good, but he won at the line. He got free. But it just vertical snap it inside. And we saw more of that in this game, Trev, I thought. But that's the thing for me is I just was like, man, I need you to do that more frequently. But like the fourth down one, I don't count that as necessarily a drop. That would have been a really spectacular catch.
Oh, yeah. He full extended.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't count that as a drop. I know that people who like to bang on Bo, so someone in the chat that wants to kind of bang on him a little bit. That's not a realistic. I mean, yeah, it'd have been a great catch if he'd have made it. The fact that he didn't doesn't make it a drop.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. And in a game where the stat sheet didn't look the way that it did, but for the offense to rattle off and do the things that they needed to, dudes had to be dudes. So I agree. Well, Brian, you got anything else on the offensive keys to victory recap? All right, my man. Well, hey, we're going to jump over to the defensive keys to victory review and kind of see where that side of the ball matched up. Going to be a little bit different tone of what the offensive side of the ball was. But before we get there, guys, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, and of course, subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, it's time to talk a little bit of defense, man. And like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a different tone from what was on the offensive side of the ball because Notre Dame kind of, when things were in doubt, went to their back pocket and stuck to their guns and went to the side of the ball that got them to this point. And the number one overall key for the defense was their ability to make quick adjustments because we hadn't seen Gunnar Stockton yet for 4 quarters of football. So how do you evaluate how they met that key?
Oh, I give them that's a plus or a check. Excuse me, a borderline plus for me because I mean you look at Gunnar Stockton's numbers. He started the game 7 of 7 for 109 yards, and he finished the game I think 13 of 25 for 120 some yards, 129 something like that, 125. Yeah, they adjusted well. I thought they did a good job handling the bootleg stuff that we saw from him. They always had a guy in place, and that was actually an immediate adjustment, like just something that they were prepared for. You think of just the second play of the game with the stop Josh Burnham made. Like, you know, Josh is running out towards the back, but he's got his eye on Gunnar Stockton, and he makes that play. You know, Junior Tuilamaka staying home on a read zone play and blowing that play up. And, you know, so I thought they did a pretty good job with that. I thought they did a pretty good job of handling what was going to be different with Gunnar Stockton. And I think, you know, like the one play that they made the big play, it was just a great job by Aaron Smith to kind of attack Christian Gray's leverage and kind of freeze him for a second. And then once he gets you to freeze, you're done. And Christian didn't do a great job of playing that particular route. You can't slow foot Aaron Smith on the go route. You've got to open and run with him. And then Gunnar threw a ball that was a great ball. Drake Bowen drilled him on that play. That was a phenomenal throw. But they didn't give him a lot of those opportunities the rest of the game. they did some things where they mixed up the coverages. I thought they did a good job there and forced him to, like, they did a nice job at times of forcing him to go where they wanted him to go with the football in the matchups they liked with the football. And so in that regard, I give them a check. And I thought they did a good job too with the run game. There was a couple things that Georgia did they could never do twice. And I thought Notre Dame did a good job. I mean, part of that's just like just being fast, really, really fast. But overall, I thought this was a very good game plan going in, and they adjusted very well. Like, there's a lot of talk about from people like Paul Feinbaum and Mike Bobo sucks. And I'm not a big Mike Bobo fan by any stretch of the imagination. But it's like, have you guys ever stopped to think that maybe this is just a really good defense? You ever get annoyed by that? Because I sure do. Like, you guys know this is the same defense that absolutely annihilated Caleb Williams last year, right? This is the same defense that held C.J. Stroud to one of his lowest passing yardages ever in his entire career in college football. You guys know this is the pass defense that, until they put their backups in the fourth quarter, was completely annihilating Drake May in 2022. Do I need to go through the long list of this is a pass defense that held Marvin Harrison Jr. to less than 100 yards total in 2 games? I mean, do I need to keep going down the list of this is just a really good freaking defense, and there's only so much Mike Bobo can do, and twice Mike Bobo schemed up a play that had a receiver wide open. That never happens in Notre Dame. You had it on the play to Dylan Bell, where there was a mix up in coverage based on what Georgia did pre-snap, and then you had that really nice call on the read. They ran like a jet motion with Cash Jones and just kept him running up the sideline. That's Mike Bobo going all the way back to week 2 saying, I think if we go tempo, we can get that against them because they're going to be in communication, and I think they might turn this guy loose, and that's exactly why they went to that call. Cash Jones running wide up, up the field for a touchdown. But he just couldn't go back to things like that. And eventually Notre Dame adjusts, and you only have so many cracks at it. And after that, Notre Dame shut him down. This isn't because Mike Bobo sucks. This is because this Notre Dame defense is really good. And they just kind of do this to everybody. And it's a really well-coached defensive football team and a very talented football team. And you can try to scapegoat Mike Bobo all you want. And again, not a Mike Bobo apologist. I've been saying it for a long time. But that game was, well, what if they'd have done this? It wouldn't have worked. What about that? Wouldn't have worked. Guys, Notre Dame's dudes are better than your dudes. It's just your dudes are good enough to make some plays here and there, but they're not good enough to do it consistently. This is a really good freaking defense. This isn't a like listening to Kent. Well, who'd they beat? Louisville? I'm like, you couldn't name a single player that plays for Louisville. So just stop talking. But there's too many fans that are that way. This is the number 2 scoring defense in all of college football. That's it. The number 1 ahead of them is Ohio State. The number 3 scoring defense is Ole Miss. The number 4 scoring defense is Texas. Well, guess what? Notre Dame held Georgia below their season average, just like Ole Miss did. And just like Texas did, but they held them even more under it than Texas did. I mean, so this year, Georgia had to play the number 2, the number 3, the number 4 scoring defenses in college football. And guess what? All those teams shut them down. But with Ole Miss, it's, man, they got Walter Nolan, and they got this, and they got that, and that's a great defense. And it is. With Texas, they got Jahdae Barron, and they've got this. And that's true. But with Notre Dame, it's, Mike Bobo sucks. And it's just a continual just lack of just any kind of common sense or intelligence. I don't even think at this point in time it's bias partly, but I think it's just honestly just ignorance, to be completely honest with you at this point in time.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, if every single team after they played Notre Dame's defense were going searching for a new offensive coordinator, the coaching carousel this season in college would be nuts. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame held Georgia to 10 points offensively, which ties them for their season low because Ole Miss also held them to 10 points. I bet you can go back through and look at what Notre Dame's defense did, and that was the case for a lot of teams, right?
Yeah.
So it's not this, man, they just had a bad game against Notre Dame and the offensive coordinator's terrible and he came up with a horrible game plan. No, that's lazy. I think it's goofy. But to answer the defensive keys to victory question for making quick adjustments. I'm with you. That gets a check for me. And I was thinking about going with plus. And honestly, I think part of the reason why I didn't was because I thought that there was going to be more adjustments made if the pass rush wasn't going to be able to get home. I'm not going to lie to you. I think that there were some adjustments that Al Golden had in his back pocket that he just didn't have to use legitimately. And so, I
didn't go plus. I didn't go plus because I thought they were slow to adjust to the inside breaking routes in the first half.
Yeah.
They gave up too many slants. They gave up a couple in cuts that it's just like, okay, third time, fourth time it happens. It's like you should have adjusted by now, especially when you're bringing double inside fire. You can't just give easy inside leverage to a tight end on double inside fire.
Right.
Because that's what they're going to go to. Make them beat you outside. And then later in the game, they did that. They forced the tight end outside and played him inside leverage. And part of that was because where he was lined up. And you end up making the play. But still, definitely a check. And if I was going to change it from a check, it'd be to a check plus. Right. I mean, you can even say check plus. Not quite a plus, but close to it.
Sure. Yeah. The second key that we had for the defense was stop the run. And this one's going to be pretty obvious. But Brian, what do you got for us?
Total minus. I mean, I can't believe he gave up a 20-yard run. I mean, this is definitely a plus. I mean, look, Georgia was not a really good running team. We talked about that coming in this matchup. The question was, would they be able to handle Georgia's size? Or it was going to be, is this game going to be about big boy football, or is this the game will be about athleticism? And Notre Dame was able to dictate it and make it about athleticism. And the way that Al Golden called the game, and that could kind of be up front is, he didn't ask Donovan Hinish to two gap all game long. He didn't ask Howard Cross to two gap all game long. He turned his athletes loose in this game and allowed it to be about athleticism. And once it became about athleticism in the box, they had no chance against Notre Dame. And Georgia did not run. It was their second worst rushing performance of the season. Ole Miss had 59 yards. They held them to 59. Notre Dame held them to 62. Ole Miss held them to 101.8 yards per carry. Notre Dame held them to 2.1 yards per carry. And just like the passing numbers, it was all about one play. They had a 28-yard gain on a play where it was actually a pretty well-designed pass or play. They faked the reverse and then ran an outside zone. And Notre Dame just got out leveraged, and you had one guy with a chance to make a play, and he didn't make it. And they ran for 28 yards. Outside of that, they did nothing in the run game. Nothing. And it was dominance. And so, they're not that good. But it's one thing to say, okay, they're not that good. But it's another thing to say, like, you kind of pretty much did to them what the other great defense. Because I can remember the team I was most worried about Notre Dame facing in the SEC, I said it all in November, is Ole Miss, because that front seven is legit. And Notre Dame did to them basically almost exactly what, again, 1.8 per carry to 2.1 per carry, 59 yards compared to 62 yards. You know what I mean? Like, they did to them what Ole Miss did to them, and they did that without Riley Mills, without Jordan Patel-Ho, without Boubacar Traore. That is a brilliant performance. And, I mean, it's a plus. This is an easy plus, but it was a really, really impressive performance, Trev, to see what they did in this game. It's a really, really impressive performance. And just real quick, in the game against Georgia or against Ole Miss, their longest run was only 12 yards. That was really the difference. Was they held them to 12? They gave up. The 28-yard run was the difference, and that you not take it away, because I hate when people do that, but like outside of that, it was sheer dominance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, dominance is the perfect word. Look, Georgia was not the vintage running team of old. We talked about that in the week and a half leading up to the game, right? I mean, they went from like 11th and 9th in yards per carry in 22 and 23 to like 90th, so they were shades of what they were, but they averaged 129 rushing yards coming into this game. If they doubled the total of what they had in 4 quarters against Notre Dame's defense, they would still be under what their season average was in yards per game. It's dominance,
by 5 yards. Yeah.
It's dominance. So Yeah, no, this one is a very easy plus for me, especially once you factor in what Stockton's running ability was coming into this game. Not that Carson Beck was some stiff, but there was a lot of talk around his dual threat ability and what he did in high school and the different dynamic that he adds to that. And he finished the game with negative 23 yards rushing. Obviously, you have to factor in the 4 sacks that he took because that goes against. But
you did that against a mobile quarterback. I mean, that's the key is you did that. I mean, I had Georgia fans in the chat. Not Sean D. I thought Sean was a great. I'm not sure if Sean's in it tonight. I mentioned this last night, but I thought he was really fair, really good, really honest. But then you had this primetime dog clown that was in the show talking about they're not going to do this, and then Carson Beck not even as good as Gunnar Stockton, and Gunnar Stockton's actually better. And what I said was this could be good for Georgia because it's going to force them to kind of go back to what got them here and running the football. But against Notre Dame, it just didn't matter because they just couldn't block Notre Dame's players. And Trev, you had mentioned this to me before, but this is where RJ Oben is going to get a lot of love for the sack. But I thought he was also outstanding against the run in this game, setting the edge. And that's something you brought up to me before the show started. Was like, a lot of people are going to talk about how great that big play was, but RJ played very well throughout the game. And a lot of it was how well he played against the run, which is so ironic because that was the weak part of his game coming from Duke.
Yeah.
But that's been sort of the thing he's been best at in the second half of the year at Notre Dame, and he hasn't done anything as a pass rusher until this game. But like you mentioned the one play where Gunnar Stockton kept the ball and Junior tackled him for a loss. Well, that was a smart play by Gunnar because if he hands that ball off to the running back, it's even a bigger loss because RJ Oben was all over that guy.
Yeah.
There's a couple plays here and there where I thought they got pulled around, but I thought the defensive end as a whole did a great job with handling the misdirection, the counters. Like there's a play where they faked like one direction. They ran like a trap play backside. Notre Dame was so prepared for it, just blew it up. They ran a reverse in the game. It was actually a pretty well-designed reverse. And you see Notre Dame players kind of going with it, but then all of a sudden you'd see Drake Bowen and Xavier Watts just reading it perfectly. There was another play where I'm trying to remember what the run was, but there was a play where if you see it from the All-22, you start to appreciate just how great Xavier Watts is. Like 10 guys from Notre Dame are going one direction and Xavier's going the other direction. Now, that doesn't mean the other 10 guys got duped. That was Xavier's guy. So even though everything was telling us this way, Xavier was so locked in and knew exactly what to do that he didn't get sucked into all that. He sees this guy coming around and he's going to blow it up. And he did that 5 or 6 times in this game because that's about the 5 or 6 times they tried him on it. You know what I mean? Like it was just, they were so well prepared. And I just was, so part of it was Notre Dame's guys whooped the Georgia guys. The other part of it was they were so prepared for this game. I mean, it's just like that's what's so disappointing about the 2 huge mistakes Drake Bowen made on the touchdown drive, and he made 2 big ones. One is he was coming on a blitz, and the way it is if certain guys on a blitz that if you're bringing more than 5. Somebody, if the back runs a route, you got to peel and chase the back. And Drake started to peel and chase. And then when he saw the quarterback start to run outside, he stopped and went to the quarterback. He needs to keep going to the running back, but he let the ball get outside. And then a couple plays later, he gives up the touchdown. But like outside of that, Drake was really good, especially against the run. Like he was physical. And there was one play where he blows it up and he gets up and he is barking. I mean, he is in Gunnar Stockton's face. I mean, you're just like, Drake is a little intense right now. You know what I mean? But he never lost control because he was constantly just getting everybody lined up. And that level of poise and production from a young player just speaks volumes about how good he is and how smart he is, but then also about the level of preparation. Like, and it was everybody. It wasn't just a couple guys here. First was it first play of the game, Trev? Let's see here. Georgia's first play. Yeah, first play of the game. They run a toss play, which is a bread and butter play for them. Jalen Sneed executes perfect outside leverage. He takes on the block, blows it up. I think it was because Notre Dame started in a 4-3 defense, personnel-wise. It was Jalen Sneed, Drake Bowen, and Jack Kaiser all on the field together because Georgia started in 12 personnel. And we told you that, like, we think that if Notre Dame go to 12 personnel, don't be surprised if Notre Dame goes to 3 linebackers. I do believe we mentioned that last week. But Drake blew it up. Jack did his job. But if Jalen doesn't play fast, aggressive, disciplined football, maybe the guy gains a couple yards, but he takes on the lead blocker, perfect inside shoulder, taking him on aggressively, shocks the blocker, and immediately comes off to the ball carrier and tackles him for a 2-yard loss. So it's just like, it was such great team defense. And as people in the chat are saying, and I was really hard on Jalen Snead earlier in the year because he was so talented, but he was still very undisciplined. He's become such a better player late in the year, not because he's faster, he's more physical. The tools have always been there, but he's so much more disciplined, and he understands if I play within the defense, I'm going to make a lot of plays. And that's why he's been such a better player. And this was one of the best games he played, and it wasn't just that particular play. But what Georgia found out last night also, Trevor, at the end of the day, this is a really freaking fast defense.
I think I can't even take credit for bringing this up because I saw somebody put it in the chat earlier. And it's something that I used to say a lot in these shows. I haven't brought it up in a while. But Marcus Freeman's whole mantra of clarity equals velocity. And you were bringing up the point of these. Not only were they very fast and flying around the field and hitting hard, they knew exactly where to be. And prime example of the clarity equaling velocity is if you know exactly where to be and you can go do it at 110%. I know exactly what Xavier Watts play you're talking about. They ran it. I don't think it was a reverse. I saw the play on Twitter.
It was like a counter,
Yeah. It was like a counter, like touch pass thing. And I think it was to Dylan Bell.
Going one way,
yes.
And they brought that another, yeah.
And the video I was on Twitter circled Xavier Watts, and the entire motion of the defense was flowing this way. And you just see number 0 just screaming down. I mean, it's stuff like that, man. But this defense played really fast, completely shut down the run.
And you see, like Jalen, this is the thing that frustrates me. It's like, and I shouldn't allow it to frustrate me, but it's like, they're even Notre Dame fans, hey, look, I'll even admit that Georgia still has better players top to bottom. And I'm like, I'm not going to admit that because I don't necessarily believe that to be like, do they have some stud players? Yeah, they do. But so does Notre Dame. It's like you're starting to see Jalen Snead play like the top 100 player that he was, the 5-star player he was. Drake Bowen, you're seeing him play like the top 100 linebacker he was. Jack Kaiser was a 4-star recruit. You know what I mean? Like Christian Gray and I mean, Gabriel Rubio was a top 100 recruit. Howard Cross is a 4-star recruit. Josh Burnham was a top 100 recruit. I mean, these are dudes. Junior Talamaka was a top 150 recruit, of course, until he committed to Notre Dame. And it's like, let's not forget that these Don Schuler was a 4-star recruit. Georgia tried to flip a Don Schuler in high school. And you look at it and you're just like, these are dudes, guys. These are, but to your point, they're not winning just because they're so smart and they're so well coached. That would make them a 17, 18 point per game defense like Notre Dame was under Clark Lee and Mike Elko. They're holding teams at 12, 13 points a game because not only are they smart and well coached, but they're also really talented. And Jalen Snead is the perfect, and Jaden Osbury also was a top 100 recruit. I forgot to mention him. And so you're just cycling through these top 100 linebackers. Oh, by the way, we saw Kingston a little bit last night. Not at linebacker, as it was more as in pass rushing role, but he's going to get healthier and healthier. Another top 100 recruit. Like, that's what I don't think a lot of these SEC fans realize this, and these Georgia fans realize, like, you guys know that, like, Notre Dame's, like, cycling through top 100 players of linebacker the entire game. But now that these guys are playing within the system, they're making a ton of plays.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And it's awesome to see. And to your point, they're playing to the caliber of player that everybody thought that they were going to be when they got here, right? Mm-hmm. So we've briefly touched on some of these already, but always good to revisit them. The third key for the defensive key to victory was pressure Gunnar Stockton, physically and mentally. So, I mean,
I give him a check, not a plus, because I don't think they got to him early. I think early on, I thought they allowed a few too many easy access throws. That's what we were talking about earlier. The slants, the things where you're kind of allowing him to get to his first read. That's why he started 7 for 7 for over 100 yards. I thought after that big hit that he took from Drake, I think that's when you started to see the pressure start to get him. You know what I mean? And Notre Dame was starting to get to him. He started getting hit more. They started doing a little bit better job of mixing up their coverages. They played a little tighter coverage. And some of the throws he made some great throws. The back shoulder throw to Dylan Bell's a great ball. The go ball to Arian Smith, that was a phenomenal pass as Drake Bowen is drilling him. I mean, that kid had some guts. Like, that's what pisses me off. Like, you Georgia fans that are out there blaming this loss on Gunnar Stockton, you don't know football, because that kid was a big reason you were even in that game. That 66-yard throw was a dime. I mean, the throw he made to Dylan Bell was a dime. The throw to Cash Jones was a dime. A couple of the back shoulder throws he caught were dimes. But that's how it is against Notre Dame. If you're not perfect, it's going to be incomplete. That's just how this team is. And he found that out. So eventually they started to get to him. But early on, I thought they had a little bit of a trouble. They got to him physically early on. He had the Jack Kaiser sack and the Drake Bowen hit. But he felt comfortable early with his reads. It took a while for them to kind of, and that's where the adjustments thing came on. It took them a while to kind of see that, adjust that, and then they started shutting it down after that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll give it a check as well. I was in between for the point that you brought up exactly of it didn't happen early. Like, a quarterback doesn't start the game. A first-time starter doesn't begin the game 5 for 5 if he's uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So I'm with you there. But towards the end, it definitely started to ramp up a little bit, and you started to see what that looked like. And towards the end of the game, he was extremely, extremely uncomfortable. So I'm with you there. The fourth defensive key that we had talked about for Notre Dame was be prepared for the gimmicks, the shot plays. And, I mean, starting off the bat, they tried to reverse on the first play or on the first series of the game. And you had guys like Gabe Rubio screaming like 10 yards into the backfield to try to get a stop, trips him up a little bit, slows him down. Everybody else rallying cry to the football. Yeah, man. I mean, for me, I'll just kind of get my grade out of the way. I'm going to give it a check. I really want to give it a plus, but for some of the lapse of communication in the touchdown drive, letting Cash Jones wheel up the sideline there, that was an uncharacteristic mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. Christian Gray just playing flat-footed when one of the fastest players in college football is inevitably going to run a go route. That's a negative for me in terms of a shot play. 90% of the game was good, but that 10% is what's keeping me from giving it a plus. So I'm giving it
100%. 100%. Same page, Trev. Like the 66-yard play, shot play, the play where Dylan Bell was wide open. You don't get credit for him dropping the ball. The blown assignment on the running back, follow route, trail route to Cash Jones. Those were bad. What you did is a lot of the other stuff that they did, you locked down. Like, they did have the one reverse for 13 yards, but that was later in the game where Notre Dame was kind of adjusted a little bit, and they were almost kind of willing to give up some of that, as we've seen from Notre Dame. They'll play off a little bit because, you may get 13, but you're not going to go for 50. But overall, they did a great job. I mean, like you said, the misdirection stuff, they did a great job of that. The trap play that I was talking about earlier, where they like fake like they're going to sprint out one way and bring the running back over the other way on like a little quick trap play. They blew that kind of stuff up. They blew up their counter runs. I did that video breakdown talking about some of the things we're going to see from Gunnar Stockton with the read zone, with that empty quarterback draw stuff. Notre Dame was all over that in this game. So I thought they did a great job in that regard of limit. Yes. So you can't give up those big plays, but honestly, like the 66-yard bomb, I mean, Christian's got to do a better job there. That was also a freaking dime from Gunnar Stockton. I mean, who was getting drilled. I mean, did you see how hard he hit the ground when Drake hit him? I mean, he almost hit it. So the ground's hard. I thought he was right back up.
Yeah. I thought he was going to be a little bit shaken up with like a concussion or something with like that recoil. You see that all the time.
Oh yeah.
Is like the whiplash of the back of your head hitting the ground. And I mean,
I didn't think much of Gunnar Stockton coming in this game. He played a lot better than I thought he was going to play. But the biggest thing to me is he showed guts and toughness in this game. And like, he's a farmer. Like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Right. I mean, I grew up around farmers. Like I great respect for them because I could not do what they do. I respect people that do things that I would not be able to do. And that is without question. Just getting up that early in the morning, I wouldn't be able to do, but those are tough people, man. But I mean, if he doesn't throw, like as bad as Christian Gray got beat, if he underthrows that ball at all, Christian Gray's right there to make a play on that football. Like it needed to be a perfect pass, even as bad as Christian Gray was on that throw. And I thought that was the one bad play I thought Xavier Watts made the whole game. He has to come off the hash a lot faster than that. And a lot, he also he went a little too level. And we talk a lot about how people underestimate Notre Dame's speed. I thought that was one where Xavier didn't properly gauge the speed of Arian Smith. The other two were just blown assignments, and you can't have those. But outside of that, Trev, to your point, they shut that stuff down. Outside of one drive and then one play and another drive, they did a much better job. And that's why in some of the other throws that Arian Smith got thrown to him, Dylan Bell got thrown to him on deep balls, they didn't complete them because they were better, and Christian was in better position. And if he's not holding on to the jersey, they wouldn't have completed any of the other ones or had any positives from the other ones. So, yeah, that's a check for me. But to your point, you can't give up a 66-yard bomb and have a guy drop a pass that would have gone for another 60-yard touchdown, and then in that same drive give up a 32-yard touchdown pass because you blow coverage and get a plus from me. So, but it was still outside of that
100%.
Very good, and you get a plus for me on it.
Well, and the way that I look at this too is a check in a matchup against a team with this talent. We talked about it all week leading up to Georgia, and we're going to continue to talk about it the more Notre Dame stays on this playoff run. When you go up against good teams, they're going to get theirs too, right? Notre Dame wasn't going up against Stanford, right? They weren't playing Florida State, where a check is like, yeah, you did what you should have, like you did the bare minimum, so you didn't do bad enough to earn a minus. A check against Georgia is a darn good grade. Because we just talked about the thing that didn't make it a plus was like 3 plays. You know what I mean? Against a good offense with good talent, with a quarterback that played much above the level that I'd given him credit for.
Right.
And so that's.
But you also got to clean that stuff up because you do that. You make those mistakes against Penn State and those running backs and those tight ends. That's a better offense you're facing next week than the one you just faced, in my opinion.
Totally.
I think Penn State's got a better offense than Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't make those mistakes. And they're going to dial up some stuff too. But that's why I think in some ways Georgia was a good offense to prepare you for Penn State. They use the tight ends a lot. Not great at receiver, but good. They got one burner, just like Amari Evans at Penn State. You use your backs a lot out of the backfield, just like Georgia does. And so hopefully it'll help you. And they're dialing up a lot of different funky stuff, just like Georgia does. So I think it was a good preparation game for what you're going to face against Penn State. But yeah, you got to clean that stuff up and not make those mistakes.
Totally. The last key that we had was tackle. Yep. And I mean, again, pretty resounding. I'm sure I know what your answer is, but
oh my God. Plus, this is one of the best tackling performances I've seen from Notre Dame defense in a very long time. Since back when cornerbacks were wearing like D-tackle pads now. You got to go back and watch Todd Light play back in like 1990. My dude was wearing pads bigger than what Howard Cross wears now. You know what I'm saying? Like back then, cornerback pads were like nose guard pads now, left guard pads now. Like that 2 reasons why. 3 reasons why. Number one, great coaching. They were just in position. And when you're playing fast guys, you just can't let them get going. And when you're meeting them at the line of scrimmage constantly on reverses and jets and screens, they're not going to get going. I mean, they tried multiple times to get screens and they just ate it up. So when they're catching the ball, they're getting tackled right away. So great positioning and great discipline. Number 2, this is one of the best jobs Notre Dame's defense has done in space of just not missing. Pro Football Focus had Notre Dame down for 4 missed tackles. That's what I have Notre Dame down for. It's 4 missed tackles. And none of them, there was like one that was really problematic, and that was on the 28-yard run by Nate Frazier, on the outside run on Nate Frazier. You got to make that play. But when you look at the rest of it, it was phenomenal in space tackling. And then the third reason for it was you just have really fast guys. And I just don't think that Georgia, like a lot of teams, Trev, you've been saying this for how many weeks? Vince has been saying this for a while as well. I don't think teams really understand and appreciate how fast this defense is until they face it.
Nope. I mean, it's no mystery to me that Georgia began the game with toss, then reverse.
Yeah.
It's trying to test them to the perimeter. And it's almost like every single team goes up against this defense. And it's kind of like, I think of it when it's like, if any of you guys have a pool, it's like May or end of April, early May, you're wanting to get that seasonal depression gone. You start dipping your toe in the pool a little bit and it's still too cold to get in there, even though every single year, April and May is still too cold to get in the pool and you keep trying it anyways. That's how I feel what opposing offenses do to Notre Dame.
Yeah, it might have been cold for him, but it's not going to be cold for me.
Right.
I'll be able to handle it.
Right. And it's almost like that of, well, I know that the 13 other teams didn't have a lot of success getting to the perimeter against them, but we have faith in our guys, which to some degree, from a coaching standpoint, sure, have faith in your guys. But when there's 13 examples of teams not being able to beat Notre Dame's defense to the perimeter and showing success kind of running at them at times, think that's a little bit interesting. But, for all the reasons that you said, definitely a plus for me. The other additional thing that's making this a plus for me is not only did they tackle well in space, when they had the ability to, they laid the wood in that game, man. I mean, to the point where I had some buddies texting me that aren't Notre Dame fans in the slightest. They like different Big Ten teams. A buddy likes an Alabama team and just fans from all around. And they were like, okay, didn't know Notre Dame hit like this.
Yeah.
Hey,
we did.
Yeah, tried to tell you.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't care who you played. A hard hit is a hard hit. You know what I mean? Like laying the lumber.
There's two ways to be physical at the point of attack. One is to be big and powerful like Jalen Walker. The other is I'm building up a lot of speed. You know what I'm saying? And that's what Jalen's eats 220 pounds. But when he hit that running back, that guy, because he's running at you kind of fast and he's arriving with force. Yeah, but how many times have we talked about watching other teams play and you're just like they're constantly getting like we talked about the Virginia game. They're just the whole game, guys on their offense were just limping off the field. And it's like, yeah, Notre Dame's not big, but this is a strong, physical, fast football team.
Oh yeah, I mean you saw it a lot again. For Georgia's defensive players, some of them especially down in the trenches, they were hobbling off a little bit. Yep. And then the wide receivers out in space, to your point about tackling well out in space, Dylan Bell, Arian Smith had their moments of when they got up. Arian Smith, I think, went on a reverse at one point in time. Yep. And he met Leonard Moore. And getting hit by a 6'2", 195-pound corner hits a little bit differently when you're 6 foot, $185. You know what I mean?
And Don Schuler, we've talked about this since he was in high school. That kid is built like a Greek god. You know what I mean? And that was when he was an 18, 17-year-old kid. But he's also athletic and powerful and not afraid to hit. I mean, they were laying the boom on guys yesterday.
Man.
I mean, just
the hit Adon Schuler had on Trevor Etienne to force that fumble.
And the ball went flying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he hit it behind the line and the ball went flying through the line of scrimmage 6 yards downfield. This team, like you said, Trev, this team is physical, but also smart. It wasn't that RJ Open, it wasn't just that he had the sack, but he had the wherewithal to say, I'm coming high, I'm going for the strip. That's what you're taught. And, man, it was for context, somebody asked, Notre Dame averages over eight missed tackles a game. And they've gotten a lot better the second half of the year and had several games where they're less. But 4 against a team like Georgia is really good.
Very good.
Really good.
100%. All righty.
Yeah,
we get on.
Really impressive.
Good on defensive keys.
Yep.
All right, man.
As a matter of fact, actually, Trev, I actually think we're good to go to Super Chats next because I think a lot of stuff that we talked about, we kind of wrapped up. So I just want to mention a couple things here real quick that we didn't get a chance to talk about, and we'll just finish it in this segment as opposed to making it its own segment. A couple things that we saw from film. I mentioned it earlier. Xavier Watts played well. Watching it live, he was even better when I got a chance to go study, because I can't watch all 11 guys at once on a play. But just his football IQ is off the charts. And it was Malachi Starks had a good game yesterday. There was zero doubt about who the best safety was on the field yesterday. Zero doubt. No. And it was Xavier Watts. There's no question he was the best player on the field, the best safety on the field yesterday. In coverage, as a tackler, being disciplined, being where you need to be. He was excellent. And best overall safety on the field today. But the most impactful safety was still a Don Schuler. I mean, I thought both of Notre Dame safeties outplayed Malachi Starks in that game yesterday. But I thought Xavier was even better than I thought he was than when I watched him live. I thought that Howard Cross did not make a lot of plays in the game. I think he had like a couple tackles, didn't have any tackles for loss or sacks, but he held up really well at the point of attack. He did a really nice job of being gap sound and being disciplined within the defense. And even though he wasn't able to get off the ball or get in the backfield, he forced a lot of cuts to other people that then made plays. I thought he was as sound as he'd been in this game. I thought all three of the D tackles overall played really well. Like, that was a big part of the game. Like, they dominated up the middle. The trio of Cross, Rubio, and Donovan Heinisch. And I know that we didn't really hear Donovan's name mentioned until the end of the game, but he was steady the whole game. I mean, he was really solid the whole game. I thought they played really well in that regard. I thought they were very active in that regard. So we wondered, how are they going to hold up, right? How's Gabriel Rubio going to handle stepping into Riley Mills' shoes? Was he as good as Riley Mills? No, he wasn't. He provided zero pressures. That's not his game, though. His game is shut down the run. And you know what he did outside of one play? He shut down the run. So I thought they played really well. I thought the linebackers as a whole were excellent in this game. It's like you're going against veteran linebackers who are also really good and really impactful. Georgia's linebackers were impactful in this game. Like, that was the best part of what they had going on, was their linebackers. Their linebackers were very good. Notre Dame's linebackers were every bit as good as Georgia's linebackers were in this game. I felt that was true as run defenders. They don't use Notre Dame's linebackers to pressure the quarterback necessarily the way that they use Jalen Walker. Kingston will do that, but he was coming off of an injury, missed a month of football. But as far as run defenders, I thought they were outstanding. Again, we talked about the couple mistakes, but I thought overall, and I know, Trev, there was one linebacker that you wanted to talk about as well that really popped to you on film in this game.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I think flies under the radar, not intentionally by anybody, but Notre Dame has just such a wealth of young talent that I think a lot of people forget about Jack Kaiser, man. And this game, he showed his experience, and he showed that he is just as athletic as some of these young guys that are moving up the ranks in this game, because that kid was I can't even call him a kid. That man was flying around. I know. Like,
he was engaged. He's in his mid-20s. You know what I mean? Like, he's a grown-up. But he still looks just like he did as a freshman. He's got a little bit of a baby face, but he doesn't play like a young buck.
No, and Jack Kaiser, to me, I mean, he played such a good game. And it's no surprise to me that when you look at the final box score, that Xavier Watts and Jack Kaiser were two of the three leading tacklers on the team that day. Jack Kaiser played a huge role in helping stop the run. It felt like if Jack Kaiser was not the first person to the football when he was on the field, he made darn sure he was the second or third.
Yep.
And then the last thing, and I won't harp on it too long because we've already talked about Gabriel Rubio, but there were moments where we said that he was going to have to step up and play at a level that he had yet to play at this season, right? He was the one guy that, we said everybody else just kind of has to do what they've done. Gabe Rubio kind of has to do a little bit more. And the one play that stood out to me was there was a run play where Tate Ratledge, mind you, was a first-team All-SEC selection guard. Tate Ratledge is 6'6", 320 pounds. It's a big interior offensive lineman, right? Like, that's Aaron Banks type size. And we remember how big he was at Notre Dame. And Gabe Rubio, with one arm, drives him off the ball, throws him 3 yards to the side, grabs Trevor Etienne with his other arm and wraps him up and stops him for 1 yard. Like, those are the things, Brian,
The
you said
play after he got driven off the
Yes.
ball on a 3rd and 6 to give up a first down, that play happened on the
Yes.
very next play, which is what we talked about, Trevor, of these guys. Even when they'd make a mistake, they would almost to a man would immediately answer by making a play.
Yeah. I mean, it was that play summed it up. Like, it's almost like when a mistake was made, they took that personal. And they're like, oh, okay, you got me that play. Not this time. And that was common throughout the entire defense. But you said it perfectly in the postgame, Brian. It's, Gabe Rubio stepped in. He's not some kid that they had a walk-on tryout for because they were so depleted at defensive tackle. There's a highly touted guy coming in here, and that to me is what I really think was a difference maker. We already talked about Gabe Rubio and what his impact was, but for me, the one guy that I did want to shout out was Jack Kaiser, because I think with all of the talk of the young talent, and I feel like the veteran guys we talk about a lot for good reason, is Xavier Watts, is Howard Cross, was Riley Mills. Jack Kaiser has been a very steady, and he's starting a new position this year, so it's not like he's just been playing the same role that he has for the last 5 seasons, So Jack Kaiser was everywhere, and he stepped up and needed to be the captain that he was in this game. And him and Drake Bowen are slowly becoming a real nice compliment to each other, man. It's so fun to watch. Fun to watch.
And I just had to ban someone in the chat. Like, guys, don't tell us what to talk about. Don't curse at us if we're not talking about what you want to talk about. I literally named Junior Tuihalamaka as my defensive player in the game. This show is meant to talk about things maybe we didn't talk about as much yesterday. I literally gave him the game ball after the game last night, and you're cursing at me because I'm not talking about him enough. We already talked about him. I literally gave him the Player of the Game award in my written article at Irish Breakdown. You got to calm down, bro, and you'll start cursing at me because we're not talking about who you think we're going to talk about. Plus, I was going to talk about him again because of how well the defensive ends played in this game. But I gave you a lot of chances. I kept telling you to calm down, but when you start cursing at me, that's not going to fly here, man. Right? That's not adult behavior. And this is why you keep getting banned at other places, I would imagine. I've given you a lot of rope here. You can't do that, man. Especially when I literally named the freaking guy the defensive player of the game last night. What else do you want me to say? I talked about him for a half an hour last night. Literally a half an hour I spent last night's show talking about Junior Tuihalamaka. Not just how he played last night, but how proud we were of him, how he handled not playing early in the season, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Talked about the interception he had against Miami 3 months ago. And you're going to come in here swearing at me, dropping F-bombs because I'm not talking about Junior Tuihalamaka? Come on, bro. I didn't want to ban you because I love your passion, but you can't do that, man. You can't do that. But yes, Junior played great last night. And if you don't think I think that already, go listen to freaking last night's 5-hour show because a good 10% of it was talking about Junior Tuihalamaka.
It was. It sure was.
So, come on, man. But yes, the defensive ends needed to step up last night, and they did. And it wasn't just the flashy plays. It was the other plays too. It was the other stuff. It was the little things like you were talking about with RJ Obentrev, the stepping up and making those plays in the run game, taking on lead blockers, forcing bounces by the running backs, or sometimes it's spilling, sometimes it's forcing. So, and they did a great job with that. It seemed to me last night that they were looking to force back inside more than spill, which I was actually a little surprised by because I thought with the lack of size that they would want to spill and let the linebackers and safeties kind of get to the ball. I thought they were trying to force everything back inside, which tells me that Al Gold was very confident in his interior players holding up and his linebackers crashing downhill and blowing up runs. So I thought that was impressive.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of the outstanding defensive line play too for me is they own their identity of they were going to have to get ugly and play ugly this game. Like some of their play might not have been highlighted on the stat sheet. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, hey, there's going to be some times where we're going to have to ask you to go in and do the dirty work, and we're going to let Kaiser and Bowen and Sneed and Osbury and Schuler and Watts go in and kind of clean up the foundation that you set to shut down this run game, and they owned it. Right. And then they were rewarded by going and having the best edge rushing game that they've had since they lost Botello and Trey.
Yeah, and Boubacar, yeah.
You know, and so that to me, that speaks volumes about this team. It really does. And the defensive line play has to remain at that level going forward.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not going to get easier. Not going to get easier.
So last night you had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pressures. 8 of your 23 pressures last night were from your defensive ends. That's a third.
Let's go.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially for a team that blitzes as much as Notre Dame does. Like Jalen Snead had 3. Drake Bowen had 2. Jack Kaiser had 2. Leonard Moore had 1. Don Schuler had 1. Xavier Watts had 1. So, like, your defensive ends had more, like, position-wise, had as many as anybody else did against a team that honestly doesn't give up a ton of edge pressure. I mean, they are pretty decent in pass pro for the most part. Georgia was, and they were finally healthy. So, I thought those things were very strong parts of the game. And then offensively, we talked a lot about Mike Denbrock, and we did talk about Riley Leonard a little bit, but that was one thing I was going to talk about was I thought really Riley was off last night reading defenses. There was a lot out there to be had. First play of the game, reading the wrong side. He just looked flustered a little bit from a going through his progression standpoint. You had to play in the third quarter that you and I were looking at before the show started, where he's got a one-on-one backside. Jordan Faison just smokes the guy off the line. It was actually, I think, Daniel Harris. Yeah, he just runs by him. And if Riley just hits the top of his drop and launches that sucker, he's running underneath it for a big play. And there was about 5 or 6 of those missed opportunities. And you actually heard Riley say that after the game. He was getting there. He said, I played really bad in the pass game. I don't think he's talking about the passes that he completed. I think he knows the passes that he missed. But you know what? He didn't let that affect the other parts of his game. He didn't start forcing balls, into bad spots. And even after watching film, he's still my player of the game for what he did. But there was more out there to be had. For sure.
Which is a good spot to be in if you have 2 potential games left to play for a national championship.
Yep.
It is.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of times, Brian, I think you brought up a really good point. There's a lot of times when, and I said this a lot, probably I sounded like a broken record the week leading up to the game, is this is why you brought Riley Leonard to Notre Dame, and this is why Riley came to South Bend. And I think a lot of times people get wrapped up in he's about to go pass for 250 yards and rush for 100 against Georgia's defense, right? But part of the reason why is we've seen Notre Dame quarterbacks in the past when an aspect of the offense or an aspect of their game gets shut down, there's just no response.
Yep.
And Riley, I mean, he did not have a good game passing, right? Outside of the touchdown pass to Bo Collins, a third down conversion to Mitchell Evans, and a couple here and there to Jordan Faison, it was not there. It wasn't. But what he made up for was 14 rushes for 80 yards, average over 5 yards a carry. And he was a big reason why the offense got jump-started there in the first half. That's why, right? Just to add a little bit more context to when you hear people say this is why 13 came to South Bend. It was not to pass for 90 yards in the Sugar Bowl. It was to do anything that he could as a natural competitor to win. And that, to me, is what's the most exciting, Brian.
Yep, no doubt. So, Trev, we're going to go to Super Chats here in a second. But before we do, folks, y'all know the drill. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And, of course, as always, the best way for you to support Irish Breakdown is going to be subscribing at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That's where we have a lot more of our conversation. We put intel pieces. I'm definitely going to have a breakdown video of the Georgia game. I know I've been not getting as many of those out as I would like, but there will definitely be one from this game, a couple actually from this game. And then and we'll have those as well. So you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So Trev, we did have some super chats that I want to get to here before we go. And I want to get to Renee's first. And I hope Renee's still watching, but he did send several super chats. So one, it was from Renee. Appreciate that, Renee. Why are any of us French traded at all? We're the best team in the darn country. Been for the last few years. Appreciate the super chat there, buddy. Again, sorry about having to ban you, but yeah. What do you guys think about Junior Chilamaka? He's killing it. Based on the half hour I spent talking about him last night, I'd say I thought he did pretty good. We're the best team in the country. And then Bro Sania Tuialamaka. I don't know what that means, but I'm sure it means something good about Junior Tuialamaka. But as I said last night, and as we said again today, Junior played a heck of a football game. And not only that, but he's guys like him are a big reason why this team is as good as it is, because he's a kid that even though things weren't going his way early, played 0 snaps on defense first 2 games. He stuck with it. Guys like him, Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler. And you respect guys like that because of what they do. Gregory Gilbert, more cowbell. Thank you for that, Gregory. Appreciate that very much. Zach Martin, first of 87 more supers. Yeah, I'd be awesome. That wasn't going to happen, but that would have been pretty awesome. Thank you for that, Zach. I appreciate you, man. And I saw you in one of the Georgia shows yesterday, giving them a hard time. That was pretty awesome because I was listening to some of the Georgia shows, and you'd have thought the stuff they said before the game, like that never happened.
Shocker.
It just never happened.
I'm sure.
Well, we knew that they weren't going to do this, and we knew they were going to struggle there. And I'm like, what? You sit there and talk about how they got a secret weapon named Travis Etienne who's finally healthy, and their name is going to be able to stop them. And then you're like, well, we knew they were going to struggle to run the ball. No, you didn't. People lie, dude. Michael S., how do you think Beck's ability, experience would have improved Dogs' play over Stockton? I think it would have hurt their offense, to be honest with you. Like maybe hits a couple more passes, but I think Notre Dame would have had 2 or 3 more sacks in this game than if he doesn't play, to be honest with you. And Gunnar Stockton did not force the ball at all last night. Carson Beck would force the ball a lot. And the way that they were covering last night, Trevor, forcing balls against Notre Dame last night would have resulted in a couple more turnovers.
Yeah.
So I don't think that that he would have been any better. And again, Gunnar Stockton played well last night.
Yeah. I mean,
Gunnar Stockton's not the reason you lost that football game.
Yeah. The kid passed for 234 yards, a touchdown, no turnovers in his first ever start in the quarterfinals in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, I can't ask for much more of the kid than that.
Yep. Michael S. also said, funny, Denbrock said, we set offensive football back 15 years. I mean, I get where he's coming from, but you could sense sort of the frustration at times. Like when he patted Riley on the head, you just kind of felt that was like a, oh, I love you, kid, type of moment. You know what I mean? Just like, I don't know what else to say. If you don't laugh, you're going to cry, but you love the kid's heart. But sometimes you're just like, just throw it there. It's there. Just throw it there. Miles Whitaker with a super chat. Thank you so much for this one, Miles. What was the final tally on the super chats in last night's show, and what was the previous record? So I don't know what the previous record was because I don't look at that. But like we started shows with like 60 or so, and it would stay around 60 or 70 for like an hour or so. But we went so like the show went about 5.5 hours. Only about 2 to 2.5 of that was breaking down the game. The rest of that was super chats. Like there was a point where we started with 86 at the beginning, and about an hour in, we were in the 90s, meaning even though we had answered a bunch, we had gotten in more than we could answer. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate y'all and just the support you guys gave us last night. We really appreciate that very, very much. But I haven't actually looked. I don't, because it takes like 24 hours for it to kind of process. And since it was like midnight, 1 a.m, some of those won't have processed yet. So I don't know that we're going to have a lot, but we did pretty good last night. You guys did really well last night, so we appreciate that very, 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 very much. So that was awesome. But the previous actual record is we raised about, I think it was like, I ended up being like $3,000 or $4,000 of super chats when we did a fundraiser a few years ago for the local community. We ended up using that to that was just on super chats. We also raised about $7,000 or $8,000 on donations to the site, and we gave every dime of that. So we ended up buying food for 3 different shelters and Faith Mission and a couple others. Then we ended up buying a bunch of like clothes and linens and things like that for one of the homeless shelters, and we still had $5,000 left over. We met every need, and we donated that to the local Boys and Girls Club.
That's awesome.
So they stepped that up. We need to do stuff like that again, and I'm sorry that I haven't done that, but we'll eventually get back to doing stuff like that. But that was the actual record, but that was a little bit of an asterisk because the whole show was geared towards, raising money for that cause. So, but there's no question. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but we've never had that many super chats, and y'all weren't exactly giving a bunch of $1.99 super chats last night. You guys were really in a great giving. You were in a very giving mood last night, everyone, and we love you for it. Thank you for that. And then Jimmy Costanza. Now, speaking of helping out and loving IB, Jimmy was Vince. This is who was partnered with us for the tailgate. This is who that is. So, Jimmy, thank you for the super chat, buddy. He was there with his nephew. Jimmy. And made that great. So, like the big tent that we had, all that, that was Jimmy helping us. He bought the extra spot. By the way, Jimmy, I need you to shoot me a text because I need you to get me your address. I need you to get me your shirt size so I can send you some IB gear for all of your help. So Jimmy stepped up big time. We appreciate you very, very much, buddy. Thank you for the super chat. He said, great win. Now let's go smack Penn State. Go Irish. Amen. Trev, I can't think of a better way to end the show than smack Penn State. I am with you. Tomorrow we'll go live. I don't know the specific time. We'll either go live at 7 or 8. I'm not sure. That's why you got to hit that notification bell. I'll also tweet out the show, but Trevor and I got to kind of go over our schedules and see what our Saturdays look like and talk to the missuses, the plural missuses, to find out kind of what our schedules are tomorrow. But we will go live tomorrow. We will introduce the Penn State Notre Dame. So because the game is on a Thursday, we're kind of already in game week now. So this is a little bit of a different deal. So we've got Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we only have 5 days to really get all the breakdown content in here between now and kickoff on Thursday, the 9th. So I'm excited about that. But we're going to be rocking and rolling. So we need time also tomorrow to really dive into the Penn State film also, so we can kind of give that initial breakdown. So we'll have all that for you guys starting tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll start that dive, and we're going to focus all on Penn State for these next few days. And then, of course, we'll have a post-game show on Thursday after hopefully that win, and then, do upon further review the next day. And then hopefully we're talking about Ohio State or Texas the day after that. So, but that's our plan for tomorrow. I'm going to talk to Ange tonight because we want to coordinate something. I do believe we're going to try to coordinate something down in either Miami or Fort Lauderdale about a meetup, an IB meetup. So, but I'm going to go put some on the board. I need to find out who's going to be down there for that, and if there's going to be enough people from IB down there to kind of do something like that. So let me know. I'm going to put a post up on the board if you are a message board member. If you're not, let us know in the chat. If you're listening and it's not live, go ahead and put that in the comment section. Shoot me an email. Everybody knows my email address. It's super easy. It's literally my first name, Brian, at irishbreakdown.com. Try to make it as easy as possible for you. You can shoot me a DM on Twitter if you're going to be down there the day before the game. So we'll do something on Wednesday night, the 8th, and have some fun with it. So go ahead and shoot me a message if that's something you're interested in partaking in, because we've had great turnout in the last couple of years, but I just want to make sure this is a little bit different because people have had to travel to Indiana or to South Bend for the Indiana game. People have traveled down to Georgia or New Orleans for that game. I'm not sure who all is going to be able to also make the Miami game. So we'll see, but we'll have some fun with it. So that's it. Just want to give everybody a heads up on that. So for Trevor, I'm Brian. All y'all have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.